Try to improve the blood flow to the area, but he's already on blood pressure medication, isn't he? You said he's not eating? No, he's not. And he's how old? Almost 11? Yes. Then she just looked at me. He's hurting, Rob, she said. Not just from walking into walls. His joints hurt, and it probably hurts to chew. That's why he's not eating. I thought of that dog in Greece, and wondered suddenly if it wasn't pain that had turned him into a monster. I thought that it probably was. Just as simple as that. Pain of some sort. And then I thought about what my mother had said about Bo being my dog too, and it was clear to me that she was right. That probably it had been true all along, but I just hadn't noticed. Because I didn't feed him every day, walk him every day. Maybe Aristophanes' owner had noticed I had a dog already, but not me. I hadn't been looking closely enough. But there was no question that he was mine now. Mine to do the right thing by. I think I forgave the Greek dog then and there. Thought I understood him, even wished him well. Because now Bo was something of a monster too. A monster to himself. Beyond all blame, yet a creature defined overnight by hurt. His body forsaking the pup inside, betraying the dog my mother loved, and who I loved, and who loved us in return. I realized I knew something about betrayal, too, and had for quite a while. I want to be there, I said. I want to hold him. Is that all right? That's just fine, she said. She saw the tears. She reached out and placed her hand gently on my forearm, just as I knew she would. I held him to the end and said a soft goodbye. From my mother's house, I called Dorothy's apartment and told her what had happened. We talked for a long while. I told her that I wouldn't be coming back to New York that night. I was staying here with my mother. She was understanding and kind. At the end of it, I told her I was thinking of settling in for a while, turning down some assignments, turning down a whole lot of assignments, maybe, possibly even trying my hand at a book. Who knew? She laughed at me, but I could tell she was very pleased. You're full of surprises, she said. What next? A dog? Thanks to William Brockett. Bill Brockett's a merchant seaman and an old buddy of mine. He called me one day and said he'd just had the strangest experience. He was outside a Connecticut store doing some shopping when this great big guy, a total stranger with a great big dog, came along, and for some reason he was sure this guy was going to talk to him, and then just as sure he was going to touch him. Brockett's not exactly a touchy-feely kind of guy, nor is he particularly given to psychic intuitions, but it turned out to be a very pleasant encounter. Though he worried for a while that the guy might have been a Jonah consigning him to the deep. The incident with the dog in Mykonos is true, and happened to me pretty much just as I wrote it. Same with having to put down my mom's dog, Bo. I got some string, and pulled the three together. Chapter 16. Consensual. By Jack Ketchum, writing as Jersey Livingston. We rolled away from one another. We were exhausted, both of us, but for different reasons. Her reason was that her coming had been a hell of a long time coming. So long, in fact, that I was practically ready to go again. They say the tongue is the strongest muscle in the body per square inch, and I didn't know about that, but mine felt like it had been bench-pressing 100-pound weights. 100 repetitions. "You want a beer, Stroop?" she said. Her fingernails were drawing tight little circles around my navel. I was old enough to be her father. It didn't matter. If she kept that up, I'd be ready again any minute, but my tongue still needed a rest. "A beer would be nice, Carol." She reached across my chest for the royal blue kimono I only knew was royal blue because now and then I'd seen it in the light. She kept the bedroom as dark as the inside of a cave, and at the moment it smelled about as rank. Summertime sex in the city. I heard the rustle of silk, and her perfume wafted toward me, like a sudden field of clover. "Be right back," she said. The bedroom door opened, and she stepped out into the dimly lit hallway, and I could see a little. The kimono fluttered across her thighs, like a big grateful butterfly riding along for the nectar. It had been 3 weeks now I'd been fucking Carol, and I'd yet to see her wholly naked. Her habit was to turn off the lights before we started, and close the bedroom door behind her, like this was a quickie, and she was expecting company any minute, even though it wasn't a quickie, and she lived alone. The blinds were always drawn. She never seemed to want to fuck in daytime, so the most I could tell, from what little ambient light the city streets provided, was that she wasn't deformed, had a nice little mole on her left front hip, and was of generally uniform color. I asked her once what was with the Stygian darkness bit. "We couldn't light a candle, maybe." We'd both quit smoking, so glowing embers were out. She laughed. "I don't know, Stroop. I think it's sort of sexy. A little spooky. Like I can't tell what you're going to do next, where you're going to touch me. A little dangerous. It's like I'm doing it with, well, a kind of succubus, you know?" "Incubus. Succubus would be you." "Right. You don't mind, do you?" To quote our president, security is the essential roadblock to achieving a roadmap to peace. Huh? Look it up. Washington, D.C., July 25th, 2003. I don't understand. Whatever makes you feel secure or insecure, Carol. Whichever you want, it's fine with me, even if they're as confused as that dickless fuck. The exceptions being golden showers, vomiting on purpose, and coprolagnia. Coprolagnia? Playing with shit. Ew! I thought you'd feel that way. I'd never questioned her about it since, though sometimes I wanted to. Taste, touch, and scent are perfectly good senses, but sometimes you want a little presentation as well. The parsley sprig on the dinner plate. She slid into the room through the crack in the doorway with 2 cold Becks sweating in the bottle, and we savored them. We'd met over Becks at the Allstate Cafe. She asked me if I had to work tomorrow. I told her I didn't. The goddamn copy was in. Drill bits. I was writing about drill bits. The book was a flop everywhere but at the remainder tables. So I was back to copy again. My next assignment? Crest white strips. Don't be annoyed if you can't quite see the connection. You? No, I switched shifts with Janet. That was a relief. I didn't need the guilt. It was 2 a.m. already. Carol was a nurse's aide on the geriatric ward over at St. Luke's, and even though she was 25 years younger than me, still just a kid as far as I was concerned. Even on a good day with plenty of sleep, she was dead on her feet half the time when it was over. That mean we can go again? She smiled and finished her beer. She said. Sure does. She set the beer down and got up and closed the door. Closing the door. That was how I knew she was serious. The dark descended, and she descended, spread-legged across my thighs a few seconds later. She was naked, no kimono. Her body was cool to the touch, and then it wasn't. We made the usual noises. "You know what we never do, Stroop?" she said. She was riding me high, posting like a rider in an equestrian event, and I was below her, pumping away. I wasn't really used to questions at this juncture. What?" "We don't talk about what we like, about what really gets us off." "I thought we were getting off pretty good, Carol." "We are." For emphasis, she hit the saddle twice. Hit it hard. Think a pair of body blows from Sonny Liston. The saddle said, "Oh!" and "Oh!" The saddle was way too old for this shit. She posted again. Much better. "What I mean is, everybody has some special thing, or things, they like during sex, right? Sometimes you find out what they are by accident, trial and error. You trip over them. But it's better to just tell it, get it out there, don't you think? Because sometimes the person never finds out." "Kind of like a G-spot?" I said. "A sort of little to the left kind of thing?" "Kind of. What do you like, Stroop?" "I like this, Carol." "I know you do. You're not going to come yet, are you?" "Not if we keep talking. I don't think so." "Good." I wasn't exactly sure I was telling the truth. It was a pretty safe bet that Carol wouldn't come, even with me working her clit with thumb and forefinger, which I'd been doing continually since she climbed aboard, with only that one minor pause during her switch from equestrian to bronc-buster. The noises she made told me she liked that fine, but it was the tongue that really got to her in general. The weightlifter. "So, what do you really like? Tell me and I'll do it." "I'm embarrassed, Carol." "No, you're not. Nothing embarrasses you." "Our president does." "Bush aside, Stroop." "That didn't sound right, not under these circumstances. Was that meant to be instructional? You want to rephrase that?" "Goddamn President Bush aside, Stroop." "My nipples are sensitive." "What? Right now? Is that a bad thing?" "No. The left one's slightly more so than the right. You sort of nibble at it. That'd be good. But either one will do, left or right. Your pick." "I thought it was only women who were really sensitive there. That's rare in guys, isn't it, Stroop?" "I don't know. It's not the sort of thing that normally comes up in conversation during the Yankee game. You see that line drive? Yeah, man. My nipples are sensitive." Then I shut up because she bent over and went to work on the left one, and she was so obviously a natural at it that I had to wonder if there wasn't a woman in her past somewhere, thinking it was maybe something to ask her about later. Not that I minded one way or another, and I could feel it travel all the way down my spine into my cock in little electric bursts. She must have sensed something, because she pulled away. "You going to come, Stroop?" I said. "Oh, no, you're not." And I didn't even see it coming. There was no way to roll with the thing. It was a good one, too. All of a sudden, my cheek was burning, and the crown on my molar, upper right quadrant, felt loose. "Jesus, Carol, you slapped me! You goddamn slapped me!" I had to admit it had done the trick, though. I was down, though not out. "Sorry. Reach over and turn on the light, Stroop." "Huh?" "I want to show you something. The table lamp. Turn it on." This was interesting. I was going to see whatever it was she hadn't wanted me to see so far. At first I couldn't figure it. She looked like a woman with all parts intact, very much intact, and I wondered for the umpteenth time what she saw in an old bum like me. Her areolae were darker than I'd expected. The navel dove deeper than my tongue had bothered to notice. That was about it. She turned a little to the right, and I saw the white, smooth scar tissue over 2 of her left ribs, crawling toward her back, a few inches below her breast. The one on top was maybe an inch long, the one below it more like 3. "Phew," I said. "And I never felt those?" "I hold my elbow this way. It's hard to reach them. See? Did they disgust you?" "Hell no, Carol. Guys like scars. We're kind of odd that way, but what the hell happened?" I pumped a few times, and she posted, just to keep things rolling. "I was driving my boyfriend's car one night, back in high school. Some drunk kissed my bumper passing me on Route 10, and I went off an embankment. My boyfriend was so goddamn proud of that car. Vintage black 71 Volvo in fabulous condition. But there were no airbags back then, and I wasn't wearing a belt, so I went into the steering wheel. Compound fracture of the ribs. I reached around, and I could feel them sticking out of me. It was pretty intense." "Intense? I would think so. God, yes." "I came like a son of a bitch, Stroop." "What?" "I swear to God, I didn't think it was ever going to stop. It was pouring out of me." "This is a joke now, right?" "No. It was pretty embarrassing, too. I was wearing these Garfield Thrill Me panties, and they were just soaked through completely. And you know the medics, they had to undress me, so—" She let it just trail off that way. And that was fine by me. I was starting to wilt again. She pumped, I pumped. That was better. But I was starting to get this feeling, this weird, bad association. I had the sense that what she was going to say to me next would not be about nipple nibbling or blowing in her ear. "I get off on broken bones, Stroop. That's my thing." "You do? You get off on broken bones?" "I do. For me, there's nothing like it." "That's pretty new and different, Carol." "I know, but I'm not the only one, Stroop. There are chat groups on the net. There's websites." "Uh-huh. You should check it out." "Sure, why not? I've already been through most of the quadruple amputee sites." "I'm serious, Stroop." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean any offense, Carol, honest." "So, will you?" "What, break your ribs?" She laughed. "No, silly. That would be getting pretty extreme, don't you think? You could do a finger, though. I'd really like that. In fact, I'm getting all hot just thinking about you breaking my finger, Stroop. Will you do that for me?" "I wouldn't know how, for God's sakes. What if I tried to break it and just disjointed it or something? Would that be disappointing to you?" "You think I'm crazy, don't you?" "No, I think you're getting wetter all the time, though. Geez." "I told you. I work with osteoporosis patients, Stroop, you know. They break bones every day. Sometimes I get so hot, I have to go to the ladies' room and— Am I telling you too much about this?" "It's possible." "You think I'm crazy?" "I do not. If you wanted to get pregnant, that would be crazy." "Fuck me, Stroop. Break my finger, okay?" How isn't a problem. I'll show you how." "You've done this before." "Not to myself. It doesn't work if I try to do it. I chicken out. Somebody else has to. But yeah, there have been guys willing. Look at this." She swung her left foot up beside me on the bed. I thought that was pretty damn athletic of her. I pumped a few times. New position. Not bad. "See that?" Her big toe was a mess, all bent to hell out of shape. I hadn't noticed that. Who looks at feet? "That was Ron. He went overboard one night with a pair of pliers. I told the doctors a manhole cover fell on it. I don't think they believed me, though. I dumped him the following day." She swung the leg around. We were in post position again. She pulled up high so that I was almost out of her. Almost, but not quite. My shaft was suddenly very cool and wet, the glands nestled. "Here's what you do," she said. She took the pinky of her left hand between the thumb and forefinger of her right, so that the thumb pressed flat against the bottom of the second joint, and the forefinger pressed down over the knuckle. "This is called a phalanx. It's a very small bone, but you'd be surprised how hard it is to break. See, the joint ligaments and capsule tend to rupture before the bone snaps, which is pretty intense too, but it's not what we're after here. You have to do it fast, and you only get one try." She drew up and down, a smile in her eyes and on her lips. "Come on, Stroop," she said. "Astound me." I took her hand. I placed my fingers just so. I guess I got it right. "You know, not many guys will do this, Stroop." "I'm not surprised." She moved aside the heavy butcher-block cutting board and snuggled close. It was the following night. I had just taken out her terminal phalanx, the tip of her pinky, with a ball-peen hammer, smashed it against the board. Same hand. The board was wet with blood. The bed was wet with us. She'd decided to wait on dealing with the first break, just splinted it herself. She was going into work tomorrow, and she'd have both of them taken care of then. She hadn't decided on the right explanation yet. I couldn't help her on that one. My imagination failed me. Meantime, she'd thought ahead this time, and had gauze and tape and peroxide and codeine waiting on the nightstand. At least I didn't have to look at the thing, unless you counted seepage. "How bad is it?" She smiled. "Bad. I took the codeine, though. I really want you to know, Stroop, that was one of the best. God, that was good." "Thanks. You weren't so bad yourself. What's next?" She considered. "I don't know. I work with my hands, so I have to give these time to heal. A toe, maybe?" "You'll limp." "I bought these shoes that are a little too big, just in case." "In case?" "In case I met somebody like you, Stroop." I couldn't fathom what in the hell it was she was feeling. Imagination failed me there, too. She seemed happy, though. "Yeah, toes, I think," she said. "Plural?" "One to start with, silly. I've got this vise under the bed in the toolbox. You can do it slowly, little by little. Oh, my God, Stroop, there I go. I'm getting wet again." "Wait a minute. You're not saying—" "No, Jesus. I couldn't take that now, not after this." "Okay, I get it. You got it. I'm there." I slid down the long, delicious length of her and proceeded. I mashed her middle toe right foot the following week. It occurred to me that Carol might have done very well during the Inquisition. Thumb screws, the boot, the rack. I doubt they'd have known what to make of her, though, except to be terrified out of their freaking minds that they'd actually finally met a witch and would have burned her first chance they got. That would have been the downside, I guess. Carol wasn't into burning. I'd asked her. If they noticed the limp at work, nobody said anything. She had some vacation days coming, so I took some time off from the ad copy, and we flew to Sarasota. The agency was pissed. They wanted me to do a TV-only ad for a Best of Barry Manilow collection. You know the type. Your CD starts skipping before you hit the play button. I told them I was wrong for the job anyway. I liked heavy metal. They said there was evidence heavy metal was turning kids into murderers. I told them if that was true, then Barry Manilow was probably turning them into florists. It was the beginning of May, so the Florida humidity hadn't descended yet, and the hotel was cheap enough, so we rented a car and spent the days basking in the sun on the fine white sand at Siesta Key, and window shopping at St. Armand Circle, eating street side there, and then going back to our hotel to do what we did best together. And it was only when she showed me the Louisville Slugger that I got worried. We were lying in bed. Mr. Muscle was very sore. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that assault and battery? No pun intended. Not if it's consensual. I figure if you choke up high on it, you can bring it down right over my forearm. Both hands? I think you'd have to use both hands, yeah. Otherwise it's not going to break. I'll just wind up with a hell of a bruise. And we don't want that. No. Can I think about it? Sure. I'm too pooped tonight anyway. I just thought, how appropriate, you know? We're here in Sarasota. The Cincinnati Reds do their spring training down here. Whenever I see them on TV, I'll think of you. I was dead tired, too, but I kept thinking, lying there in bed, that I was maybe getting in a little over my head on this, and that the pinky or toe were one thing, but that the radius or ulna were probably another. Not to mention all the sensitive nerves and tender blood vessels in attendance. That I could possibly cripple the nutty bitch, and then where would I be? My sleep was troubled. I remember morphing into Yogi Berra at some point, and that Berra was striking out again. He could never hit worth a damn. And I remember thinking the way you do when you're half asleep and half awake that I wasn't even playing for the right team. At another point, I was arrested by the Sarasota police. The charge was breaking and entering. The wake-up call was good, though. The wake-up call was Carol's lips sliding up and down my dick, and before you could say, boy, howdy, I was tickling her tonsils with the thing. She looked up and smiled around it, and I think she said, morning. I know I said morning back. She lifted herself up onto her knees and slid me inside her, and started moving back and forth and side to side, and soon I was starting to come. I could tell it was on its way, not only from the feeling down below, but because I have this sort of involuntary grunting, moaning thing I do way back in my throat, and because I had my eyes closed, I didn't see it coming a second time. She'd reached down behind her on the bed, I guess, and next thing I knew, my right collarbone felt like it had just exploded. I screamed and bucked her off me, back hard onto my thighs, and the bat flew out of her hands to the floor, and my cum whipped off into her hair like strands of gooey tinsel on a Christmas tree. She was smiling. I was shouting, groaning. You fucking... I thought you'd like to see what it was like, she said. So what do you think? You fucking... You crazy fucking... And I don't know how I managed it through the pain, or even saw her clearly enough through the dots of yellow bursting in front of my eyes, but I leaned up into her and planted my left fist into the side of her jaw like it was born to be there once, just once in a goddamn lifetime, and then leave its mark forever. She didn't fall off the bed. She dove off the bed, sideways, almost gracefully. She looked like a girl sliding dreamlike off her ski in some Esther Williams movie. Well, we were in Florida. My collarbone was killing me. My fist was killing me. I felt like one big sack of pain. So much for the thrill of broken bones. Thanks so much for sharing. I could hear her sobbing down beside the bed. Somehow I got to my feet and walked over. She was lying on her back, her right shoulder off at a strange, unnatural angle. She was trying to hold her jaw in place with her left hand. I think you broke my jaw, she sobbed. At least I think that's what she said. I could see she'd dislocated her shoulder. I hated to watch a woman cry, so I went into the bathroom and got her a hand towel and bent down and gave it to her. That jaw looked broken all right. I got one question for you, Carol, I said. I could see our near future then, clear as the Sarasota night. The hospital, the explanations, probably the cops. The flight back to New York with the passengers and flight attendants all looking at us like, gee, what a terrible, awful shame. It must have been an awful wreck. I wonder if anybody else survived. Then the breakup, the tears, the inevitable parting of ways. What's that? She said. I had to ask. Did you come? For those of you new to Stroop, he's the subject of some half a dozen wacky yarns of mine, first published in men's mags during the 70s, then collected in Broken on the Wheel of Sex, and the hero of Sheep Meadow Story from the Triage novella anthology I did with Edward Lee and Richard Lehman. I invented him in 1976 for a story in Swank, in an obvious nod to Charles Bukowski, and he's been rampaging through my consciousness every now and then, like some outraged misogynist bull in a china shop ever since. I tripped over this broken bones fetish while cruising some of the more questionable roads along the internet, and decided it would be perfect for a loser like Stroop to encounter somebody of this particular bent, and thought it okay and proper to unleash him again. Nancy Kalanta had asked me for a piece for Horror World Online, and liked the story very much, but said that it seemed that the only thing which outraged her readers at all seemed to be explicit sex. Not explicit horrors, gougings, dismemberments, the wanton display of internal organs, but sex. Don't you just love the 21st century? Chapter 17. Seascape. He rose slowly to a dim, pale, wavering light, crawling up through dense, viscous fluid into full brightness, and then finally clarity. He saw where he'd been swimming to, and gasped and screamed. I'm going with you, she said. He smiled and put down his crossword puzzle on the comforter beside him on the bed. Outside the open window he could hear the sea, breakers against the jetty, buffeted by winter winds. I don't think so. What's a 5-letter word for mood? Moo as in cow. Beginning with an L, I think. She was polishing the bedside table, rubbing in lemon oil. Giving it a drink was how she put it. Load. And who says I'm giving you a choice, Ben? She glanced at him and nodded. Write it in, she said. Charlie Harmon had just passed by with a linen cart when he heard the scream devolve into a long, low moan streaming out from 314, and he moved past the uniformed cop, peering in through the doorway, brushed his shoulder as he passed, so that the cop seemed to glare at him a moment, and it was only once he'd reached the old man's bed that Charlie realized the cop was only startled, and maybe even a little scared. The nurse was Denise, one of the good ones. Denise had brains and dedication, and her voice had the ability to soothe without false cheer. She was using it on him now, as she lifted his head gently off the pillow, and firmed it under him, and set him back down again, and then reached for a tissue on the bedstand and dabbed his eyes. You must take it easy now. You've been through a lot, Mr. Sebald. You just rest up, and you're going to be fine. Doctor will be in here soon, and I'll be right back. I'm just going to get you a little chipped ice for your throat, okay? And you need anything else, either Charles here or I'll come running, won't we, Charles? Outside in the hall again, he walked with her to the nurse's station and the ice machine, and she sighed and shook her head. I don't know, she said. Sometimes I just don't understand. What's with the cop? Charlie said. The ice tumbled down into the plastic cup. Suicide watch, she said. There was never a time in memory when Ben hadn't loved the sea. Summers, when he and his older brother John were growing up, his family had rented a small, wind-battered bungalow in Asbury Park, New Jersey, long before the town slid into decay. The same place, 5 years running. The house lay directly on the beach. The porch was always dusted and sometimes halfway buried with sand. A boy could roll out of bed and grab a glass of orange juice and a piece of buttered toast, and 5 minutes later be scouting the hard, wet tide line for horseshoe crabs and jellyfish marooned along the shore. At high tide, he body surfed the whitecaps tumbling to the beach. He took part-time jobs summers during his college years at a lumber yard in Cape Cod and a greasy spoon diner in Falmouth, just to be near the sea and the kind of life the sea afforded, so long as you didn't have to bucket for a living. A life of flesh and youth, of tan lines and dried, white, jagged salt lines against the skin that glowed at night in driftwood firelight, that flaked and peeled, and just below which lay a smooth new layer, fresh, pink, and incorruptible. He met his future wife, Ruth, just 20 years old then, over lobster and corn on the cob at a clam bake on the beach one night, a few miles north of Portland, Maine. They slept together in the gentle susurration of that same beach the following night, and with no one else, ever again. When his brother John died, he and Ruth had been living in New York City for almost 30 years. But the sea had never lost its lure for John either. Quite the contrary. He'd bought a small Cape Codder and set up practice directly after medical school in what was then the sleepy little town of Cape May, New Jersey, long before the tourists discovered its turn-of-the-century charm. A house down by the point, where his only neighbor was a nun's retreat, St. Mary's by the Sea. When his heart failed him, lunchtime, one hot, late August afternoon, walking out of the air-conditioned, ugly mug into the sticky, thick humidity along the sidewalk, he had just turned 60. He had never married. He left the house to Ben and Ruth. They'd been happy in New York, but there was nothing particularly keeping them there. Ruth had retired from the bank 2 years before, and Ben's illustration work came and went by mail. They had no children, and 2 tabby cats, George and Gracie, who were only too happy to be packed up and moved to some place where birds large and small swooped by all day long, or pecked around for bugs along the porch, where bees and dragonflies zoomed and darted into view, and moths fluttered nightly at the window panes. They had all but stopped making love in the city. The seashore was their fountain of youth. "How's your Shakespeare these days?" she said. "What?" "Your Shakespeare. Put your puzzle down again." "Okay." "If it be a sin to covet honor, I am the most offending soul alive." "That's Henry something." "That's right, the 5th. The St. Crispin's Day speech. Very good. Now listen to me. I not only love you, I honor you. Are you listening? Yes? Good. And you honor me, right?" "Yes." "Then don't argue, damn it. The cats can stay with my sister. She adores them." The shivering came in waves, and it was violent. as though he were trying to shake himself apart, and not what Ryan knew he was really doing, generating heat. But the pauses between episodes of shivering got longer and longer as they undressed and dried him down, and then wrapped him in the polypropylene and woolen blankets and the space blankets, applied the chemical heat packs to his neck, his armpits, his groin, and the palms of his hands. Yet finally, despite all that, the shivering had stopped altogether, and now Ryan was worried as hell, because now there was no radial pulse, and only the faintest in the carotid, and that looked to be winding down as well. They hoisted the stretcher into the rear. They were doing it by the book, but the man was slipping. His temperature was down to 86 degrees, and he was damn slow about getting it up any further. He was looking at a guy whose body had passed through hibernation into a state of metabolic icebox here. Blue skin, muscles rigid, pupils fixed, and no discernible breathing. He looked dead. He acted dead. But Ryan knew he wasn't dead, and wouldn't be for a while at least. They played possum on you. The rule of thumb with victims of hypothermia was that there was no such thing as cold and dead, only warm and dead. He shut the doors behind them. The heating unit was already blasting. His partner, Knowles, had the warm dextrose drip into him, and they were feeding him warm, moist oxygen. Outer temperature was important against further heat loss, but not nearly as important as internal. They had to stabilize and try to raise his core temp as soon as possible, or they were looking at potential damage to the heart, lungs, or brain, or all three put together. "CPR?" said Knowles. "No way. He's still got a pulse. We stay with that for now. At this point, his heart's hyper-excitable as hell. We do CPR and he's still pulsing, we risk arrhythmia. We could kill the poor bastard." "Okay, what then?" He heard an engine rev and glanced out the double doors and saw their sister pull away awkwardly across the sand. "Relieve him, that's what we do," he said. "I want to express his urine. He's got a bladder big as a football from cold diuresis, and he's using up heat to keep that warm instead of the rest of him. There are times our bodies aren't too swift about priorities." "We ready to roll yet, gentlemen?" said Andrews from the front seat. Andrews was young and way too impatient for his own good, but he was a damn good driver. "1 second," Ryan said. "Knowles, grab me a Foley 12. Our guys got to see a man about a horse." He held out his hand for the catheter. The first thing he learned about even the possibility of being seriously ill was how lonely it was. It was lonely to its very core. People could be concerned, kind, encouraging, and even loving, but illness was a thing you did all on your own, something no outside hand could touch, certainly not the doctors. The doctors were there simply in the capacity of benign detectives. Well, hopefully benign at least. To them you were a sort of crossword puzzle, to be either solved or abandoned as impossible to solve, whatever the case may be. Later, they might rise to the level of trusted advisors. Still later, once you damn well knew you were sick, angels, demons, or secular gods. Yet even in their hands, as they poked and prodded, you were alone, cast deep inside yourself, aware finally that the flesh which had once sustained you beyond any question or second of doubt was now unexpectedly falling prey to time and dissolution, that your flesh had now turned undependable, and in Ben's case, since it was prostate cancer and metastasizing like crazy, that it had turned into the enemy, was hard to explain even to yourself, incomprehensible to anyone else. It was your flesh, and thus your personal enemy, and yours alone. The word alone had never held such clarity and weight. A caress could comfort, sure, but it couldn't pay the troops enough to convince them to continue the battle. The troops were tired. The troops were all in mutiny. Ruth had tried, of course. She suffered too, from osteoporosis. And osteoporosis was pain in spades, God knows, and a betrayal all its own. But people lived for years with it. It wasn't a hangman's noose waiting in the yard. Remember? Her single counterinsurgency weapon was their past, and she wielded it tenderly and with grace. Remember? The antique store in England, where they bought the cedar chest? The owner right out of Dickens? The climb to the shrine at Delos, where the wind took her wide-brim hat and sailed it out to sea? Setting up his first painter's studio in Portland, and not a job coming in for months? Ben painting angry, frustrated abstracts, until finally Bantam came through with the fantasy series. He should have stayed with the abstracts, she said, which were selling in the high 5 figures. Their first kitten, Agamemnon, who had hidden sulking under the bed for a week like Achilles in his tent, and then suddenly, for no observable reason, decided that he was master of all he surveyed. High tea with Liz and Josie at the plaza. Christmas dinner with Neil and Donald on Mount Desert Island. On and on. Her version of events was not always as he remembered them, but he supposed that was to be expected. And that was the second thing he learned about being seriously ill. What a strange and special repository he was. How much sheer history you had inside you that was going to die when you did. He realized with a kind of growing awe that his own version of events would simply disappear shortly, as though it had never existed. What would be left would be Ruth's version, or friends' or relatives' versions, or his publisher's versions, his own point of view. That which was uniquely Ben Sebald's would pass utterly from the world's vocabulary, and his secrets, guilty personal failings, which he had tried to keep hidden from everyone else all these years, even from Ruth, would ironically become irrelevant, as perhaps they always were anyway. He told her what he wanted to do. "What about Greece?" she said. "You always loved Greece." "Not Greece this time." "I'm going with you." "I don't think so." "What's a 5-letter word for mood?" Charlie Harmon was on lunch break in the cafeteria, and his luck was bad again. Sorensen sat down, unwelcome as always, with his tray directly across from him, and the tuna salad on his plate was about the same color and seemingly the same texture as Sorensen's teeth. His brilliant hospital whites only enhanced the illusion. Charlie's appetite was rapidly swimming downstream. "True story," Sorensen said. "We had 3 drunks in here from Wildwood one night couple years ago. Tail end of a very liquid wedding party. I mean, they're loaded as hell. So they decided to jump off the pier together. Made a pact. Said they'd had it. Enough's enough, right? Life sucks. Maybe they couldn't get laid that night. Who the fuck knows? But, see, one of them's wearing this really expensive cashmere coat, and he takes it off and puts it down on the rocks, and on their way off the pier, arm in arm, one of the other drunks steps on it. The guy with the coat says, "You fucking piece of shit! Why'd you step on my coat? Why the fuck would I want to go out with an inconsiderate piece of shit like you?" And he starts swinging. The third guy, their buddy, he gets between the two of them, and before you know it, all three of these guys are in the drink, and not one of them can fucking swim. They were lucky the groom came down for a smoke. His wife didn't care for cigarettes. Charlie looked at him. "So, your point is—" Sorensen shrugged. "No point, Charlie. Just how fucked up is this business anyway, though, huh? Just how fucked up is it?" "Jesus," Harmon said. "Eat your lunch." He held her, as he always had when they were young, his arms still strong round her back as he kissed her, and then shifted his weight suddenly and toppled them off the jetty into the blaze of freezing water, black granite and weathered lichen-covered concrete already well beyond their grasp in just an instant's time, should they even have thought to reach for it again as the swells moved them back and forth to sea. She gasped at the sudden, blinding cold and clutched his waist. The tide went wild only once and threw him back amid spray and foam into one of the huge granite blocks beneath the surface, bruising his hip just below where the ropes bound the two of them together, and then sent them floating free. They went down, and then up again, and he could feel them shivering almost in a kind of unison, and her eyes were wide, blinking away the water, and her face had taken on an unlikely pallor. "I love you," he shouted, and she began to say the same. "I love—" when they were drawn down beneath the wave. When they rose again, he shook his head and realized in that movement of his neck how much his muscles were already stiffening. "This soon," he thought. "Good." His throat felt rubbed with salt. The membranes in his nostrils burned. His eyes burned, too, but he could still blink the sting away and look at her. At some version of her, anyhow. One he had never quite seen before, whose lips and eyelids were stained a delicate blue. With a shock he saw that she was smiling. Or perhaps the muscles of her face were contracting into what appeared to be a smile. Perhaps it was a swindle of a smile, but he didn't think so. He thought that it was real. He felt lightheaded, almost drunk himself. He pulled her closer until he couldn't feel his hands any more, and then his arms around her, and when finally the sea drew him down to darkness, he wasn't sure exactly who was there with him at all. When Ryan, Knowles, and Andrews responded to the call and pulled up beside the old man on the beach, he still had the rope lashed around his waist, but the other end had come free so that their sister unit found the woman several yards away, lying face down just above the tide line, with her head half buried in the hard, wet sand. The two kids who found them couldn't have been more than 10 years old, but that didn't stop one of them from having a cell phone. Times like this, you could almost like the goddamn things. It had maybe saved the guy. From what Ryan could tell, the woman wasn't likely to make it. She had eaten a lot of sand. He woke and saw where he'd been swimming to, and that he was alone. He gasped and screamed. "You're a fool," she said, quieting him. "I love you, but you're a very foolish man, you know that? I know you. What you'll do is you'll wait a few months and you'll just agonize all that time, all that awful time, with the cancer and about me, too, when you don't have to. You can come right now, just as we'd planned. You just start swimming again. You know the tides." "Oh, God damn it," said Charlie Harmon. "Shit!" He reached for the paddles and thrust them at her. "God damn it!" "Hush," said Denise. "Charlie, look at his face. Look at him. You see that?" He looked down at the man, and then at her. Her dark green eyes were pooled and still. "Hush, Charlie," she said. "Shh." Thanks to Neil McFeeters and Dale Myers Cooper, Painters with Stories. Seascape was generated by a clipping Neil McFeeters sent me about an old married couple who had jumped into the sea together because they couldn't bear to be parted. He was dying while she was not. But it was she who drowned while her husband was left to die alone. I thought the story was fraught with the kinds of real, everyday horrors and awful ironies that life sometimes dishes up for us. Because the tale was basically such a simple one, I chose a structure which would jump cut back and forth in time in order to conceal somewhat exactly where it was going and give it the heft and impact I thought it needed. I changed its locale to Cape May, New Jersey, because I know Cape May. Neil and his wife Victoria live there, and resolved to give it a strangely happy romantic ending. I also thought it needed at least one brief moment of comic relief, so I included the yarn about the drunken suicide pact and the cashmere coat. Another fine painter, Dale Myers Cooper, told me that one, and she swears it's true. Chapter 18. Snarl, Hiss, Spit, Stalk. Dead cat, bored dead. All dead, boring. Mayflies, wallabies, Hottentots, everything. Dead cat, boring self. Same old, same old. Dead cat take a shot at living again. Can't hurt. Easy this time. Dead cat borrow love from crazy human. Human slash her wrists for love of lover. Crazy human cry and mumble. Disgusting, weak, pathetic. Too chicken to bounce. Dead cat, not chicken. Dead cat, cat. Dead cat, bounce. Love confusing, heavy, hard to carry. Hate, a whole lot easier. Hate direct, simple. Love, a lot like chasing birds. Cat leap, bird flies. Cat fall. Dead cat heavy. Pow! Love take cat many places. Interesting. Closet. Dark and smelly. Nap. Pillow. Soft. Nap. Microwave. Hard buzzing sound. Beeping sound. Whatever. Nap. Bookshelf. Way, way up. Nap. Box. Cardboard. Smells good. Nap. Lap. Nap. Lap. Cat is where, exactly? Human. Woman. Asleep on couch in human dwelling. Why not cat on couch? Couch soft. Warm. Why on woman? Not remember journey. Love confusing. Heavy. Woman's hand heavy. A little. Not bad. Woman warm. Woman breathe. Belly in and out. Rhythm soothing. Long, long time since dead cat breathe. Lap warm. Hand warm. Not bad. Dead cat stay a while. Dead cat make odd sound. Can't help it. Remember it from somewhere. Dead cat purring. Dead cat curious. Explore environment. Woman still sleeping. Slip out from under. Easy. Environment small. 3 squares. 12 corners, 3 doors, floor, ceiling. In 2 squares, dripping water. Nooks in bookshelves, cat can get into. Closet, cat can get into. Bed, cat can sit on or hide under. Cabinet, cat can get into. If cat cares to. Windows, light. Humans below on street. Birds, more humans. Humans with dogs. None with cats, dead or otherwise. Many humans. Some walking. Some in small rolling environments. Environments moving fast. Birds afraid. No wonder. Dead cat, jump in tub. Dead crazy woman slashed wrists in tub. Why? Why here? Smooth, cold. Not interesting. Dead cat jump out again. Up by dripping water. Dripping water more interesting. Slightly. Dead cat look in mirror. Mirror very interesting. Ugly cat look back. Rags, wrappings, fur a mess, matted, caked, dirty. Dead cat try to spruce up a bit. Tear away wrappings. Use tongue on fur. Hard work. Neck sore. Tongue sore. Cat not sure why cat doing this. Like love. Confusing. Finished. Almost look like live cat now. Almost. Hear sound. Door open. Door shut. Shut loud. Hear man's voice. Woman's voice. Man loud. Man angry. Woman scared. Dead cat jump down and peer around corner. Sniff the air. Man smell funny. Like old meat. Man unsteady. 2 big feet, not enough for man. Needs 4, maybe then steady. Big man loud. Woman step back to wall. Cat step forward. Curious. Dead cat look inside big man. Easy. Not pretty. Gift of hate. Empty. Live man dead inside already. Matter of time. Woman different. Soft. Scared. Alive. Dead cat curious. This interesting. Dead and live together, shouting. Confusing. Dead cat step into room. Ears alert. Nose alert. Tail alert. Cautious. Man see cat. Point to cat and yell at woman. Yell loud. All man does is yell. Big man boring. Woman see cat. Shake her head at man. Woman confused. Cat from nowhere. No wonder. Man slap woman. Slap again. Slap again. Woman cry. Fall to floor. Hands on face. Man walk to cat and try to kick. Dead cat. Faster. Bounce off wall and land and snarl. Bristle fur. Arch back. Bare teeth. Hiss. Man more interesting now. Man afraid. Dead cat stalk man slow across the floor. Great big man pray chicken. Cat not chicken. Cat, cat. Jump or not jump? Jump. Dead cat climb man thigh to shoulder. Fast. Easy. Fun. Man scream. Grab dead cat. Dead cat cling to man. 4 legs to shoulder and rear legs to belly. Rear legs strong. Rip, tear. Claws in man flesh deep. Stare into chicken man's face. Reach up. Bite man's nose. Bite good. Bite hard. Draw blood. Taste blood. Blood tastes good. Man screaming loud now. That good too. Let go. Fall to floor. Watch man run. Lick lips. Yum. Hear door slam. Silence. Woman sobbing. Dead cat trot over, rub leg. Nuzzle. Rub other leg. Nuzzle. Making odd sound again. Can't help it. Give woman love. A little. Plenty left. Love heavy, confusing. Glad to be rid of some. Where did you come from? Woman says. Name? Where did you come from? Maybe. Long name. Woman smiling, wiping eye water, stroking. Good dead cat spruced up a bit. Fun. Woman feed dead cat dead tuna. Not hungry. Eat anyway. Give cat water. Not thirsty. Drink anyway. Woman put box on bed. Woman open it. Cat jump in. Not cardboard. Cow. Smells good. Cat scratches. Feels good. No, you can't go in there, woman says. Name? No, you can't go in there? Maybe. Very long name. Dead cat sit. Watch. Woman open drawer. Put things from drawer in cow box. Drawer cat could get into, if cat wanted. Woman sad. Not crazy. Not go near the bathtub. Sad. Filling box. Sad when box filled. Closed. Snick. Cat watch. Woman walk to closet. Reach up. Take out second box. Put second box on bed. Smaller box. Holes in top. Holes in sides. Metal door, all holes. Broken? No. Woman open metal door. Dead cat walk over. Sniff. Smell of live cat, long ago. No cat there, though. Dead cat checked. This used to belong to my old cat Sonia. I'd always meant to get another, woman says. Name? No. Too long. Even humans not that stupid. Box dead cat could get into, if cat wanted. Dead cat wants to. What a smart kitty, woman says. Come on, we're getting out of here. Dead cat give her love, a little. Glad to be rid of some. Worry about name later. Dead cat moved to place with sun, trees, grass, spiders, bees, snakes, birds, turtles, frogs, moths, fireflies, live cats, dogs. Too many dogs. Otherwise fine. House. Plenty places to hide. Plenty places to nap. Dead cat still like lap, though. Not bad. Dead cat have a name now. Beastie. A little like Bastet. Otherwise fine. Man show up. Once. Dead cat snarl, hiss, spit, stalk. Man not show up after that. Ever. Dead cat watch. Watch woman grow older. Old. Dead cat not grow older. Dead cat dead. Dead cat give woman love, little at a time. Stroke, purr, fun. Love grow lighter, less confusing. Dead cat figure, good bounce. You can't swing a dead cat in my neighborhood without hitting a Starbucks, a Citibank cash machine, or a double-wide stroller. But a swinging cat's another matter. Not many of those fellows around anymore. So when Gerard Warner and Gack, two very cool cats indeed, asked me to reinvent one for an anthology called Dead Cats Bouncing, a companion volume to their way original Dead Cat Bounce, I pounced. I tried very hard to copy Gerard's funny, quirky prose style in the story, writing in the present tense, eliminating passive verbs and prepositions, limiting adjectives and adverbs to a bare, spare minimum, and often stringing one-word sentences together pretty much to the goddamn breaking point. It was an exercise in literary discipline and downright forgery I'd not attempted since trying to copy Robert Bloch's wisecracking dark hipster voice in the 7th grade. I had a ball. Chapter 19. Closing Time. Lay upon the sinner his sin. Lay upon the transgressor his transgression. Epic of Gilgamesh. Only the dead have seen the end of war. Plato. October 2001. 1. Lenny saw the guy in his rearview mirror, the guy running toward him, trying to wave him down at the stoplight, running hard, looking scared, a guy on the tall side and thin, in a shiny blue insulated parka slightly too heavy for the weather, one seriously distressed individual. Probably that was because of the other beefy citizen in his shirt sleeves, chasing him up 10th Avenue. Pick him up, or what? Traffic was light, pitifully light, ever since World Trade Center a month ago. New York was nothing like it used to be, traffic-wise, and it was late, 1:30 at night. He had the green now. Nobody ahead of him. No problem, just to pull away. And suppose he did, what was the guy going to do? Report him to the Taxi and Limousine Commission? You had to figure that a chase meant trouble. For sure the guy in his shirt sleeves meant trouble, if he ever caught up to the poor son of a bitch. You could read the weather on his face, and it was stormy Monday, all the way down the line. Get the hell out of here, he thought. You got a wife and kids. Don't be stupid. 10th and 59th was usually a pretty safe place to be these days, but you never could tell. Not in this town. You've been driving for nearly 30 years now. You know better. So what if he's white, middle class? So what if you need the fare? He lifted his foot off the brake, but he'd hesitated, and by then the guy was already at the door. He flung it open and jumped inside and slammed it shut again. Please, he said. That guy back there, his goddamn wife. Jesus. Lenny smiled. I got it. He glanced at the American flag on his dashboard and thought, I love this fucking town. The beefy citizen was nearly on them, coming down off the curb just a couple steps away. Lenny floored it. They slid uptown through time-coordinated greens like a knife through warm butter. Where to? Take it up to Amsterdam and 98th, okay? Sure, no problem. He looked at the guy through the rear view, the guy still breathing hard and sweating, glancing back out the window, still worried about shirt sleeves, like his lady friend's irate hubby had found some other cab and was hot on his tail. It only happened in the movies. So, what's the story? You don't mind my asking? You mean you didn't know? Hell no, I didn't know. It was a pickup in a bar. She's got her hand on my leg, for God's sakes. It's going great. Then this guy shows up. Says he's going to push my face in. Jesus, I never even paid the bar tab. I just got the hell out of there. Thank God for you, man. Lenny reflected that nobody had ever thanked God for him before. Not that he could remember. It was a first. Your good deed for the day, he thought, from the look of the shirt sleeves. Maybe for the month. So you go back, you pay your tab another time, no problem. I don't even know the name of the place. I just wandered in. Corner of 58th and 10th. That would be the Landmark Grill. The guy nodded. He saw it in the rearview mirror. And there was something in the guy's face right then he didn't like. Something nasty all of a sudden. Like the guy had gone away somewhere and left a different guy sitting in the back seat, who only looked like him. The guy's had a hard night, he thought. No babe, no pickup, almost got his ass kicked for his trouble. You might be feeling nasty too. They drove in silence after that, until Lenny dropped him at Amsterdam and 98th, northeast corner. The guy said thanks and left him exactly 15% over the meter. Not bad, but not exactly great either, considering. The next fare took him to the east side, and the next 4 down to the village, and then Soho and Alphabet City, and then to the village again. He never did get back to 10th, or even to Hell's Kitchen for that matter. So it was only when he returned to the lot at the end of his shift that he learned from his dispatcher that the Landmark Grill had been robbed at gunpoint by a tallish, thin, sandy-haired man in a parka, who got away in a cab, for Christ's sake. Everybody was buzzing about it because he'd used a goddamn cab as a getaway. Thought it was pretty funny. That, and the fact that the bartender had been crazy enough to chase him. A guy with a gun. You had to be nuts to risk it. Or maybe you had to be bleeding from the head, where the guy had used the butt of his gun on you. Lenny hadn't managed to catch that little detail in the rear view. There was never any question in his mind about calling the cops. If they didn't have his medallion number, then so be it. You didn't want to get involved in something like this, unless you had to. But Lenny thought about his 15% over the meter, and wondered what the take was like. No good deed ever goes unpunished, his mother used to say. He hated to admit it, but as in most things, he supposed his mom was right. 2. At first, Elise was embarrassed by them. No, for them. First embarrassed, then fascinated. And then she couldn't look away. The train was real late. She'd wondered if it was another bomb scare somewhere up the line. It would be just her luck to miss her dance class entirely, and it was the only class she could care about at all, so that the platform was crowded and getting more so. Mostly kids like her, just out of school for the day, and thank God it was over. Nobody but Elise seeming to care if the train was late or not. The noise level enormous with the echo of kids shouting, laughing, arguing, whatever. For sure, these two over by the pillar there didn't care. She doubted they even noticed the kids swarming around them, much less the lateness of the train. She had never seen a pair of adults so into one another. But it wasn't a good thing. It was terrible. And it was going on and on. They were probably in their 30s, 40s. Elise couldn't tell, but she thought they were younger than her mother. And the woman was a little taller than the man, who was almost as cute, for an old guy, as she was pretty. Or they would have been cute and pretty if their faces didn't keep crumbling all the time. They kept hugging and pulling apart, and staring at each other as though trying to memorize one another's faces, and then hugging again so hard she thought it must have hurt sometimes. She could see the man's fingers digging deep into the back of her blouse. And both of them were crying, tears just pouring down their cheeks, and they didn't even bother to try to wipe them away half the time. They mostly just let them come. She saw them stop and smile at each other, and the smiles were worse than the tears. My God, they're so sad. And smiling seemed to bring the tears on again, like they were one and the same, coming from the very same place. It was like they couldn't stop, like she was watching two hearts breaking forever and ever. She was already 10 or 15 feet away from them, but she found herself stepping back without even knowing at first she was doing it. It was as though there were some kind of magnetic field around them that repelled instead of pulling, as though they were pushing out at empty space in order to give them space, all the space they needed to perform this horrible dance. I meant what I said. You know that, right? She heard the woman tell him. And he nodded and took her in his arms again, and she missed what the woman said after that. But then they were crying again, though real silently this time. And then she heard the woman say, I just can't any more. And then they were crying hard again, really sobbing, clutching each other and their shoulders shaking. And she wanted to look away, because what if they noticed her staring at them? But somehow she knew that they weren't going to notice. They weren't going to notice anything but each other. They were splitting up. She knew now. At first she thought maybe they had a kid who died or something. I just can't any more. The woman was dumping him, but she didn't want to, because they still loved each other. And they loved each other so much. She'd never seen two people that much in love. She wasn't even sure she'd ever seen it in the movies. So how could you do that? How could you just break up if you felt that way? How was it even possible? She noticed that some of the other kids were watching too, and would go silent for a while, not as intently as Elise was watching, and mostly the girls, but there on the platform you could feel it pouring out of these people, and it was getting to some of the other kids as well. Something was happening to them that she had the feeling only adults knew about. Something secret, played out right out there, in the open. Something she sensed was important, and a little scary. If this was what being an adult was all about, she wanted no part of it. And yet she did. To be in love that much. God, so much in love that nothing and nobody matters but the two of you standing together right where you're standing, oblivious to everybody, just holding tight and feeling something, somebody, so much and deep. It must be wonderful. It must be awful. It must be both together. How? How could that be? So that as the train roared in and kids crowded into the car, Elise behind them, wiping at her own tears, which only served to confuse her more now, the woman stepped on a little behind her to the side and turned to the window, hands pressed to the dirty, cloudy glass, to watch him standing there, alone on the platform, and somehow smaller looking without her. And Elise looked from one to the other and back again, and saw their shattered smiles. 3. She put down the paper and washed her hands in the sink. As usual, the Sunday Times was filthy with printer's ink. She went back to her easel in the living room. Her lunch break was over. The pastel was coming along. She had that much anyway, the work. What did you expect? She thought. When things got bad, they were probably bound to get worse, if only for a little while. She hoped it was only for a little while, because she was seriously doubting, for the very first time ever, her actual survival here. Everybody in this city was fragile, she guessed. No matter where you were or who you were, world trade had touched you somehow. Even if you'd lost nobody close to you, you'd still lost something. She knew that was part of it. She could look at a cat in a window and start to cry. And breaking off with David would have been bad enough under any circumstances. Correction, still was bad enough. Because he wouldn't quite let go, and neither could she exactly. Lonely, late-night emails still were all too common between them. I understand you can't see me. I understand it hurts too much to keep seeing me, and I'm sorry. But I miss just talking to you, too. We always talked, even through the worst of it. Emails just don't work. I feel like I've lost not only my lover, but my friend. Please, call me sometime, okay? I want my friend back. I want her bad. Love, David. I can't call. Not yet. Someday, maybe, but not now. I'd call and we'd talk, and the next step would be seeing you, and you know that. Why do you want to make me go through this again, David? Jesus! You say you understand, but you don't seem to. You're not going to leave her, and that's that. And I need somebody who'll be there for me all the time, not just a couple nights a week. I miss you too, but you're not that person, David. You can't be. And I can't simply wish that away. So please, for a while, just please leave me be. Love, Claire. She knew he was hurting, and she hated that, because there was so much good between them, and the love was still there. She hated hurting him. But she was alone, and he wasn't. So she also knew who was hurting the worst. She was. She was tired of crying herself to sleep every night he wouldn't be there, next to her, or every morning when he'd leave. It had to stop. He'd never stop it. It was up to her. She'd been alone most of her life, but that was always basically okay. She liked her own company. She'd always been a loner, but she'd never felt this lonely. What was that Bob Dylan line? I'm sick of love. She knew exactly how he felt when he wrote it. Fuck it, she thought. Get to work. You're an artist, so make art. The piece was one of a series, a still life, an apple core surrounded by chains. A padlock lay open, gleaming, embracing one of the links of chain. She studied it. She knew exactly what it meant. Most people didn't. That was fine, so long as they felt it. And bought one, now and then. Which hadn't happened in a while now. Concentrate, she thought. Focus. Work the blacks. Work the shadows. But that was the other thing. Money. Cold hard cash. Financially, her life was a mess too. She'd only just started painting again. David was the main one who'd encouraged her, damn it. Had only sold a few pieces for good but not terrific money, and the New York restaurant business, which she'd always counted on as backup, had been hit hard by the Bush economy even before World Trade Center. Tourism was down to a fraction of what it was this time last year, and the natives were paranoid about going out to dinner. In the last 3 months, she'd been laid off as a bartender, hired as a waitress, laid off as a waitress, hired as a manager, a job she'd always loathed, and then laid off as a manager too. She was always assured it was a matter of cutbacks, not her performance. Last hired, first fired. Simple as that. She'd been making the rounds. Nobody was hiring. So at the moment she was jobless, with 2 months' rent and utilities in the bank, and if she didn't find something soon, she was going to have to eat this apple core off the canvas. It's Sunday, she thought. You can't do a damn thing about it now. So make the art. Later, call your mother. Get on with it, all of it. She drew a line, smudged it lightly with her finger. A link of chain sprung suddenly into focus on the canvas. She drew another. 4. What the hell are you doing? He thought. It was 2 in the morning. He was standing outside across the street from her apartment. He could see the light burning through the second-floor living-room window. Either she was still awake, or she'd fallen asleep and left it on, but to leave it on was very unlike her. She was awake. He could walk up the steps, ring the bell. No, he couldn't. He had no right to. It would be tantamount to harassment. And standing out here was tantamount to stalking. So what the hell are you doing, David? A glimpse, he thought. That's all. A glimpse of somebody you love through a brownstone window. What the hell is wrong with that? Everything. It's crazy, desperate. It's pathetic. You're not Romeo and she's not Juliet. Go the hell home. Don't want to. Your wife is waiting. By now she'll be fast asleep. You've had too much to drink again. So, what else is new? Go home. A cab cruised past him, going west. Northwest was the direction of his apartment. The cab's sign was lit. He could have flagged it down. A simple wave of the hand. He didn't. He needed something. He wanted to feel something. Now what the hell does that mean? 59th was quiet. No breeze. Nobody on the street but him. There was traffic heading south on 9th, half a block away, but not here. And even on 9th, the traffic was light. He could barely hear it hissing by. So here he was, alone, staring up at a living-room window, and afraid to look away or even to blink for fear that if he did, it would be exactly that moment she'd choose to appear, and not any other moment, and not again. Afraid of the perversity of incident and chance. Perhaps because it was precisely incident and chance that had got him here in the first place. She was a new bartender, he a regular. Quickly becoming friends, far more slowly becoming lovers. 2 years before that happened. Not until a casual date that left them alone in a crowded, noisy new dance club, they found not to their liking at all, waiting for 2 other friends to return from the bar so they could get the hell out of there. A single, slightly boozy hug, turning to a surprisingly lovely kiss, and then more, and more, and before they knew it, 2 more years had gone by, and love had trapped them as surely as incident and chance could trap anyone. The window blurred over. He wiped his eyes. He was aware of sirens in the distance, somewhere around Times Square. The window blurred again. Were the sirens doing this? Some fucking ambulance making him cry? Somebody else's distress? Some stranger's? It was possible. These days anything was. But that was too damn ridiculous even for him, and no, he saw what it was now. Literally saw it, in that way that the mind imposes an image it chooses over the eyes, so that what the eyes see in the natural world disappears for a moment, unable to compete, utterly sterile compared to the image the brain mandates. He saw it vividly, sobbed once because he knew that in the natural world he might never see it again. and certainly not the way he did now, directed so wholly at him. Her open, happy smile, and turned and started home. 5. The composite on the nightly news was not great. They'd got the nose right, and the chin mostly, but the forehead was way too high, and the eyes were completely wrong, because the eyes in the composite were bland. They held nothing, while his were full of what? Something. He didn't bother trying to go there. They were off on the numbers, too. They had him down for around 15-20 jobs this year. He had to laugh. The number was more like 30-35. Roughly one every week and a half. He figured that by the end of his own personal fiscal year, which began and ended on his birthday, just before Christmas, he'd take in 50, maybe 60 grand. Not as much as if you were robbing banks, but bars were a whole lot safer. Bars were vulnerable. For one thing, you didn't work in daylight except to cruise for likely joints to hit. You didn't have much in the way of surveillance cameras to worry about. And you didn't have some retired cop with an attitude, some asshole armed guard, willing and stupid enough to start blazing away at you. It was a pretty rare bartender who was willing to die for the till and his tips. That guy last week, though, that asshole, actually chasing him. He thought he'd put the fear of God in him, especially that last hard whack on the head. He guessed there had to be a first time for everything. Usually the getaway was simple. You headed for the nearest subway. Didn't matter where you went once you were on it. If there was a bus handy, you caught that. You got off and had a beer or two at another bar far away, and then you went on home. They'd worried out loud on the news about his gun. Some police lieutenant, mouthing off, said that seeing as he had a gun, sooner or later he was going to use it. That was bullshit. His weapons were surprise and fear. The gun was only window dressing. Loaded window dressing, but window dressing all the same. Then they tried to link him up to a wider trend, all very ominous. Seems that shootings in the city were up 24% over the same month last year, the figure spiked by the thinned ranks of the NYPD, who were now on anthrax, security, and ground zero duty since the World Trade Center, instead of manning street crime. Again, bullshit. He wasn't part of any goddamn trend. He just did what he always did. Plain, old-fashioned armed robbery. He sat on the sofa and sipped his beer. The composite didn't worry him. Except for the eyes, he was blessed with one of those more or less basic faces, a kind of no-frills face, one that set off no bells and whistles in anybody. Acceptable. That was how he liked to think about it. Acceptable enough so that guys had no reason either to fear him, be impressed, or intimidated by him, or even to remember him for that matter. Acceptable enough to women so that he got himself some pussy now and then. Not a hard face, and not soft. No scars, no dimples, no cleft palates or cleft chins. The composite didn't work. His face was far too mutable. The hair you could cut or color. For the line of the forehead, a hat or a baseball cap. You could change the eyes with colored contact lenses, or no script glasses, or just by trimming down your eyebrows a bit, or darkening them with eyebrow pencil. He thought eyebrows were seriously underrated. You wanted to avoid a good tan. A good tan was memorable to New Yorkers, who were used to pallor. You made the mistake getting of a tan, you powdered it. Physique was changeable as the goddamn weather. You're on the tall side like he was, 5'11", so you're stoop-shouldered now and then. You flex the knees. Build? baggy sweaters or business clothes one time, jeans and t-shirt the next. Backpack on one job, shopping bag or briefcase on another. He finished the beer and frowned at New York 1. New York 1 was supposed to be about New York City, wasn't it? But now they were going on and on about the fucking anthrax again. If it wasn't the anthrax, it was the fucking war in Afghanistan, or else the fucking World Trade Center. Who cared if some senator's assistant or postal clerk got anthrax, inhaled, cutaneous, or shot up the ass? Who cared if the towel heads took out skyscrapers? He strictly worked ground floor. They ended up with some puff piece about this guy who had to be the most politically correct asshole on the face of the earth, some Westchester dentist who was offering to buy up all the neighborhood kids' Halloween candy so they didn't rot their teeth. Fuck their teeth. He turned the damn thing off and got up and tossed the beer can into the sink. Time to get. In the bathroom, shaving, he glanced down at his various toiletry items and got a really great idea. "You're lucky," the bartender said. "I was just about to tell my friend here last call. What'll it be?" "Miller, thanks." "Miller coming up." The barkeep's friend probably didn't know him from Adam. His friend looked to have been on a long night's pub crawl, and only one step up from blue-collar, if that, while this was clearly a kids' bar, Barrow and Hudson, pool table and concert posters, Sweet Home Alabama on the jukebox, and the bartender not much more than a kid himself. Wire-rimmed glasses, rosy cheeks, spiked hair, good strong build under the t-shirt, Irish Navy. "Getting cold out there?" The kid poured a half-glass of Miller into the beer mug and set it down in front of him. "Nah. Good breeze, though." The barkeep took his 20 to the register. The guy next to him downed his beer and mumbled thanks, and slid off the bar stool and tapped his $1.50 with his forefinger. He was tipping the bartender $1.50. Big spender. He put his hands in his pockets and headed for the door, which meant that this was going very nicely indeed. "Good night. Thank you, sir. You take care now." The barkeep put his change in front of him, scooped up his tip, and dropped it in the bucket. He slipped on the surgical gloves. "You take care," he said. "Excuse me?" They said that a lot. You take care. You said it back to them. It threw them off balance, maybe even started to worry them right then and there. But this kid was only puzzled. He slid the .45 out from behind his sport jacket, rested it flat on the bar, pointed at the barkeep's trim, flat belly. "I said you take care. Now listen real carefully, and you'll get to go home tonight to your girlfriend. Let's say I'm an old college buddy of yours, and I'm closing up with you. So you do what you do every night, only I'm here. That's how I want you to act. I'm just here, having a drink. You lock the door and hit the lights outside, and you dim the ones in here. Only difference is, after that, you go to the register, and instead of counting it, you empty it into this bag." He handed the big brown bag from Bloomy's across the counter. "Open it and put it on the floor. That's it. Very good. Now go about your business. And don't even think about opening that door. I know you really want to, but see, it takes too long to open it, throw it back, and then go through. You'll be dead by the time you hit the sidewalk, believe me. They've already got me down twice for murder one." It was a lie, but it always worked. "So it doesn't mean a thing to me one way or the other. I'm a very good shot, though, so it would mean a lot to you." For emphasis, he clicked off the safety. He could smell it then.
That faint ammonia smell, or something like ammonia. Bleach, maybe. Fear sweat coming off the guy. Fear cleansing the guy, pouring through the fat and skin, all the way up from the organs unwilling to cease their function, unwilling to give up the pulse. He put the gun between his legs and swiveled on the stool, smiling as the guy moved on shaky legs out from behind the bar and fished his keys out of his pocket, locked the door, put them back in his pocket, and reached behind a tall, brown, sad potted cactus and flicked off the outside lights. "The dimmer's over here, okay?" The guy was pointing across the room to another half-dead fern or something. "Why shouldn't it be okay? I trust you. What's your name?" The guy hesitated, like he didn't want to say, like it was getting personal. "Robert. Bob." "Bob or Robert?" "Bob." "Okay, Bob, let's dim the lights." He watched him cross the room, not even daring to glance out through the plate glass window, afraid that even that much might get him shot. Good. It was always amazing to him. Within minutes, seconds, you could get a guy performing for you like a trained SEAL. Half the time, like now, you didn't even have to ask. "You should water your fucking plants, Bob. Know that?" He nodded, reached up, and dimmed the lights. "Okay, Bob, let's get to the good stuff." He drank some of his beer. The barkeep moved back behind the bar and keyed open the register. "Just the bills now. No change." He watched him drop the bills into the Bloomies bag. Bob had had a pretty good night tonight. From where he sat, it looked like well over 1,000. He'd read in the paper today that business was down in the city, about 357 million since September 11th. Bars and restaurants, particularly. You wouldn't know it from where he was sitting. "Tell you what, Bob, let's play a little game for your tip bucket. I'm sure you got a couple hundred in there. I'm sure you'd like to keep it. So, I lose, it's yours. I win, it goes in the bag." "No, that's okay. You can just—" He started reaching for the bucket above the register. "Hey, it's not okay, Bob." He lurched to his feet and leaned over and shoved the barrel of the gun against the barkeep's pale, high forehead. He could feel the guy trembling right down through to the handle of the gun. Saw his glasses slip half an inch down his sweaty nose. "Get this right, Robert. I say, we play a little game. Then we play a little game. Let me tell you something you don't know about me, Bob. I don't like people. In fact, it's fair to say that I fucking hate people. Not just you, Bob, you spiky-haired little Midwest shit-for-brains, though I do hate you, for sure. But see, I hate everybody. I'm a completely equal opportunity hater. Jews, Arabs, Asians, blacks, wasps, you name it. Some people think that's a problem. You know how many people have tried to help me with this little problem, Bob? Have tried to reform me? Dozens. I'm not kidding you. But you know, it never takes. Never. You know why? Because my one real kick in life, the one thing that really gets me off, is to reform all those people who want to reform me. And it is my honestly held belief that the only way to reform people is to hurt them or kill them or both. Period. He sat back down again, rested the gun on the bar, his hand spread out on top of it. Bob was visibly twitching now, mouth gulping air like a fish. Jesus, calm down, Robert, or this isn't going to work. Hand me the bag. And your keys. That's good. Thanks very much. Now slide over that cutting board there and that little knife you use on the lemons. Oh, Jesus. Just do it, and dump the lemons. The kid glanced at his hand on the gun and then turned and did as he was told. Set the knife and the board down in front of him. Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're right-handed, right? Thought so. So you're going to put your right hand down, palm side up. That's important. Palm up. And spread your fingers. Then I'm going to take this knife here, which I notice you keep nice and sharp. Very good, Robert. And jab around between your fingers. Slow at first, then maybe a little faster. Not too fast, don't worry. Believe me, I'm good at this, I really am. But if I miss, even the slightest little cut, the slightest nick, you get to keep the bucket. I don't miss, bucket goes with me. Fair enough? Sure it is. All you got to do is hold very still for me now. Oh, Jesus. Stop with the, oh, Jesus, Robert. Try to be a fucking man for a change. Or you can just remember that I got the gun here, whichever works for you. Okay, spread your fingers. The kid pushed his glasses up on his nose. They slid back down again. Then he took a deep breath and held it and put his hand down flat on the board. He took the knife between his thumb on one side and forefinger and middle finger on the other, and as promised, he started off slow. Thump, beat, thump, beat, thump. Then he picked up tempo, and the thumps got louder because the force got greater. And he really was good at this. Damn, he was good. Thump, 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 thump. And the kid kept saying, oh, Jesus, oh, Jesus. Bob, a Christian through and through now, and he knew that for poor Bob, this was going on forever. This was an eternity. And when he finally got tired out, scaring the shit out of the kid, pinned the web of his thumb to the cutting board so that the kid gasped and said, ah! And he said, don't you yell, Bob. Whatever you do, don't you dare fucking yell. And Bob didn't. Bob was toughing it out, as expected. He just stood there, breathing hard, his left elbow propping him up on the bar against the pane, and probably against a pair of pretty shaky legs, and looked down at the spreading pool of blood between his fingers. He reached into his pocket and took out the envelope and opened it, tore it down one side, and blew a tablespoon of Johnson's talcum powder directly into his face. Bob looked startled, blinking at him, confused. Anthrax, Bob, he said. It's the real thing, I promise. He picked up the bag of money, took 4 pair of rolled-up socks out of his jacket pockets, and unrolled them and spread them out over the money, like he'd just done his laundry. You try not to breathe. Now, for a while, Bob, go wash your face. That shit'll get right down into your lungs. And you know what happens then? Bucket's yours. You won it fair and square. You take care now. And if you think I've treated you badly, which I really hope you don't, well, hell, you should just see what I do to the ladies. Whether the kid believed him or not about the anthrax didn't matter, but he was betting he'd have a bad moment at least, the city being what it was nowadays. He keyed the lock, looked right and left, threw the keys in the gutter and slipped off the gloves as he walked on out the door. 6. It had taken Claire a while to do this, to work up the will and the courage finally, and Barbara had felt the same way. So they decided to do it together, and that helped. They stood in front of the Chambers Street subway exit on an unseasonably warm, sunny day, along with 30 or so other people scattered across the block, staring south from behind the police barricades at the distant sliver of sky where only a month and a half ago the Twin Towers had been. The smell was invasive, raw, born on a northerly breeze. It clawed at her throat. Superheated metal, melting plastic, and something else, something she didn't like to think about. She had never much liked the Trade Center. It had always seemed overbearing, soulless, a huge smug temple to money and power. And now both she and Barbara were quietly crying. All those people lost. She was crying so much these days. She knew nobody who had died here. Somehow, she seemed to know everybody who had died here. She stared up into the bright blue sky tarnished with plumes of pale blonde smoke, and after a while she turned around. She had never seen so many stricken faces. Old people and young people, and even little kids. Kids so small she thought they shouldn't even know about this, let alone be standing here. They shouldn't have to grow up in the wake of it either. It wasn't right. A woman wearing jeans and an I Love New York Even More t-shirt was wiping back a steady stream of tears. A man with a briefcase didn't bother. She didn't see a single smile. "Let's walk," she said. It was a whisper, really, as though they were standing in a church. And that was the other uncanny thing about this, the silence. New York City, heavy and thick with silence, broken only by the occasional truck rolling by, filled with debris, and once the wail of a fire engine hurtling through the streets to ground zero. She had only one memory of the city to compare it with. A midnight stroll a few years back after a record snowfall. A snowfall big enough so that it had closed all the airports and bridges and tunnels. It had paralyzed the city. She remembered standing alone in the middle of the northbound lane of Broadway and 68th Street, in pristine, untracked snow, for over 20 minutes, until finally a pair of headlights appeared far in the distance. She could have been in Vermont or New Hampshire. Instead, she was standing in one of the busiest streets in the busiest city in the world. She remembered being delighted with the sheer novelty of it, of all that peace and silence. This was not the same thing. They walked south down Broadway, past shop after shop, selling posters or framed photos of the towers, their eyes inevitably drawn to them. And they didn't strike her as crass or even commercial particularly, though of course they were. New York would always recover first through commerce. They struck her as valid reminders of what had been, and there was nothing wrong with that. They stopped in front of a boarded-up Chase Bank, filthy with dust, the entire broad surface of its window covered with ID photos of cops and firemen dead, all those young faces staring out at them, frozen in time forever. The thick, brown-white dust lay everywhere. On the sidewalks, the streets, the surfaces of shops and high-rises, canopies, and even whole skyscrapers were being hosed down to try to get rid of it. It was a losing battle. The site was still burning. She stared at the faces moving past her. She guessed that not 1 in 30 was smiling. They passed police barricades strewn with flowers, windows filled with appeals for information on the missing. the dead. Their photos. They passed children's bright crayon drawings, hearts, firemen, cops, flowers, words of grief and thanks. It had been a while since either of them had said a thing. She'd always been perfectly comfortable with Barbara ever since their days bartending together at the village cafe, but this was different. Each of them, she thought, was really alone here. Everybody was. The wind shifted. The stench died down. But her mouth still tasted like steel and dust and plastic. She was hungry. She hadn't eaten. Yet it was impossible to think of eating here. She wondered how the sub shops and sidewalk stands stayed open. Even a Coke or a bottled water here would taste wrong. They'd stop at each corner and gaze into the empty sky. Approaching Liberty Street, the sidewalks became more crowded, and then very crowded, and before long they were trapped in the midst of a slow-moving mass of people that was almost frightening. What felt like hundreds of people, tourists and New Yorkers, all crowding together at the barricades and straining for what was supposedly the best view of what was no longer there. And here you did see smiles and laughter, too damn much laughter for her liking. Almost a carnival atmosphere, fueled by morbid curiosity. And packed too tight together, far too tight, 7 or 8 deep, so that what if something happened? What if somebody panicked? You could be crushed, trampled. And when a father snapped a photo of his smiling little girl against the horizon, and then a teenage boy with his girlfriend did the same, she said, "Let's get the hell out of here." "We can't," said Barbara. "I don't like this." "Neither do I." She was shaking from a mix of fear and fury. "This way." It was easier than she thought. As they stepped slowly through from the center to the rear of the crowd, people were happy to take their place, so they could get nearer to the sight. Finally, they stood at the edge of this crawling human tide, their backs nearly scraping the filthy storefronts, and climbing over steps leading into other storefronts, and soon they found themselves on Park Row, leading east, so that it was silent again, finally, and they laughed and shook their heads, almost dizzy with relief, and that was when they heard it, a small, soft, mewling sound. "Is that?" "Shh," she said. "Yes." She listened. In a moment she heard it again. There was a long green dumpster on blocks and packed with rubble, mostly chunks of cement, across the street to her left. The sound was coming from there. They walked over and peered beneath the dumpster, Claire working one way, Barbara the other. "Nothing," she said. "Nothing here either." She looked behind it, a dirty, empty sidewalk, and the wall of a building. "We didn't imagine that," Barbara said. "That was a kitten." "I know. Hold on a minute." She put her foot down on one of the blocks and hauled herself up to the lip of the dumpster and scanned the rubble. And there it was, far over to her right, a tiny tabby, walking unsteadily across a narrow, jagged cement-shard tightrope, back and forth, gazing down at something beyond her sight lines, to the far side of the dumpster. They heard it cry again. She hopped down. "Over here," she said. They walked over to where she judged the cat had been, but there weren't any blocks there, nothing for her to step up on. She looked around for a milk crate or a bucket or garbage can, something. "Cradle your fingers." "Gotcha." Barbara did, and her first try failed miserably, and Claire fell back to the street again, practically into her, and they both started laughing, and then she tried it again. "Okay, I got it. Hold on." She took most of her weight out of Barbara's hands when her belly hit the lip of the dumpster, and she folded at the waist, and she spotted the cat and reached, and the kitten turned to look at her, wide-eyed at this new disturbance, and she thought it probably would have bolted had it not been perched there so precariously, but as it was, stayed put just long enough for her to put her right hand down and push further at the lip to get an extra foot of reach, so that she caught it in her left hand and lifted it away. The kitten gave one long meow in earnest now, and glanced anxiously over its shoulder, and she looked down to where the cat was looking and saw the much larger body whose markings so nearly matched its own. Its head lay hidden beneath a block of stone. She saw long-dried blood along its bib and shoulder. "Oh, you poor little thing," she said. The kitten just looked at her, trembling. "I've got her," she said. "I'm coming down." "How did you know?" Barbara said. "How did I know what?" "That it was a she?" She laughed. "I did. I didn't. I don't know." They were headed uptown, and over to the subway, and then home. Barbara carried her bag for her. She carried the kitten pressed against her breast and shoulder. The kitten was matted and caked with dust and God knows what else, and smelled like the inside of a garbage can, and she gripped Claire's shoulder fiercely. Claire didn't mind a bit. "How old do you figure? 5, 6 weeks?" "God, I doubt that her eyes were even open a week ago. She's young, really young. I'll get her to a vet this afternoon. Check her out and see if she's okay. The vet'll probably know." They were going back, roughly the way they came, past the dusty shops, and into the smell of burning, and the strange, sad New York silence. "You going to keep her?" She lifted the cat off her body and held her up over her head with both hands. And the cat looked down, and she smiled at the cat, and smiled too out into the quiet street. Forever.
November 10th, 2001. 7. When David finished work for the day, the acrylic for the YA book cover was getting somewhere, finally. He did what he always did and cleaned his brushes and covered his canvas and went to the bedroom and pressed messages on his answering machine and turned off the mute button and listened. Sandwiched between a recorded pitch from Mike Bloomberg asking for his support in the coming election and a call from his agent's assistant asking him to phone when he got the chance, she had good news for him. Was her voice saying, "It's me. Just wanted to see how you were doing," cut off abruptly. There had been whole days by now that he hadn't even thought of her, though they were still few and far between. But this had been one of them. He'd been that absorbed in the work for a change. And then her voice, or the ghost of her voice. His machine was an old analog cassette recorder, and had the annoying habit of allowing snippets of old buried messages to rise up from between the new ones, like withered fingers from a grave, rushed at him with all its force, and broke the dam inside him again. How am I doing? Some days fine, Claire. Most days not well at all. He dialed her number, something he hadn't done in weeks now, at her request. He got her machine. "It's me," he said. "Did you phone today, or is my machine messing with my mind again? I figured I'd better check. Anyway, I'm here, and I hope all's well. See you." He'd given her plenty of time to pick up. She hadn't. So either she really wasn't there, and the call had come in earlier, or her voice had been a mechanical glitch, and she still wasn't talking to him. Ready to talk to him was the way she put it. He'd wondered if she'd ever be ready.
His agent was on speed dial. She wasn't. He'd taken her off almost a month ago. Too much temptation. Far too easy. His agent said they had a terrific offer for him. Cover art for the next 6 Anne Rice paperback reissues. His agent very enthusiastic about it, and went on to outline the deal. The deal was a good one, and he sure as hell could use the money, but he'd worked with Rice a few years back and knew she could be a pain in the ass, one of those writers who seemed to think they were painters too, and let you know it each step of the way, detailing you to death, your art going back and forth for approval like a canvas ping-pong ball. "Tell them I'll take it," he said. He hung up and went to his computer and lit his 21st cigarette of the day. It was supposed to help him cut down if he counted them, but so far it had only made him nervous to know he was smoking so damn much. He went into his email. Half an hour later, he hadn't answered any of them. The words wouldn't come. It was obsessive, but all he could think of was her message on the machine. "Just wanted to see how you were doing." Maybe she really did. Maybe she had just gone out for a while, and she'd call back later. He doubted it. But he missed her enormously, and whenever he allowed himself to realize that, whenever he truly let it through, he'd cling to even the most delicate thread of hope. She'd changed her mind. It didn't matter that he couldn't bring himself to leave. She missed him too much. All forgiven. Let's try again. He knew her far too well to think it was anything but fantasy, but he clung to hope as though hope itself might make it so. It wasn't just the sex he missed, though God knows it had never been anything but fine between them, but his heart had an entire whole earth catalogue of what he missed about her, and his mind kept flipping through the pages. Sometimes, almost at random, something striking him hard for no reason. The gap between her 2 front teeth, the husky voice, the talk about mutual friends whose names he hadn't heard for weeks now, and incidents long past, and people long gone in both their lives, and art and books and feelings, the tall, proud way she walked the street, or the feel of her waist beneath his arm, or her cheek beneath his hand, or the two of them staring up at the darkening New York sky. It just went on, countless images, moments observed and shared over the heady course of 2 long years, and the friendship which always lay beneath. He pushed back away from the computer and turned it off, watched the screen crackle down to a neutral gray. The email would have to wait. He wasn't feeling up to the basically cheery voice it always seemed to require of him. A drink, he thought. That was what was in order. You got a lot of work done today. You deserve it. Have a scotch and turn on the news for a while. Couldn't hurt. Could it? He was drinking a fair amount these days. Was it for pleasure, the way it used to be, or just to throw a cozy blanket over pain? He knew Sarah worried about it. Sometimes so did he. He seemed to have to bludgeon himself to sleep these days. He got up and poured one anyway. His 2 tabby cats yawned awake on the counter when he cracked the plastic tray of ice. He scratched them both behind the ears. They fell asleep again. Sarah wouldn't be home from work for 2 hours yet, and the cats wouldn't be fed until she did. They knew that, as well as they knew every flat surface in the apartment, and the exact extent to which it was good for sleeping on. Until that time rolled around, dozing was an appropriate response to life. He wished he were as sensible and poured himself a stiff one. He was waiting for a phone call. It might be a long night. It was. 7 hours, 5 drinks, and a leftover chicken dinner later, she hadn't called. So it had been a glitch, as suspected. Tomorrow he was getting a new machine, damn it. He didn't need the torment. And it was a torment. He wasn't overstating. He felt like a caged animal in his own apartment. Sarah was in the bedroom, watching TV and doing paperwork, some homework from the bank, but he couldn't join her the way he usually did. Not tonight. He couldn't turn it off. It was as though being in the same room with her right now would constitute betrayal of Sarah, of Claire, of all three of them. He tried to read, but that didn't work either. He never painted or even sketched when he'd been drinking, and he wasn't about to start now. So that left the computer. He answered his email as best he could and then surfed the net looking for images, not sure what he was looking for, but something to startle him or comfort him. Something. He felt hot-wired to her voice on the phone. Finally, he left-clicked on the right mail icon and began his long, feverish, idiotic letter to her. A plea for some kind of communication. Any kind would do, but mostly he wanted to see her, and probably he wanted that for the very same reason she did not want to see him. It might start it up all over again, which he was selfish enough to want, even knowing it could not be good for her, and was honest enough about to make him feel guilty as sin. He didn't know if the booze was helping or hindering in the sense-making department, but the letter poured out of him, and when it was finished, he began to hit the send button, but then stopped to read it again. He didn't know if it spoke to his feelings or didn't, if it was self-pitying drivel or not. Fuck it, he thought. Fuck it, fuck it, fuck it. He saved it into the mail waiting to be sent file. Maybe he'd send it off tomorrow when he was more sober, and maybe he wouldn't. Meantime, he was not going to sit here staring at a computer screen all night. He knew where she worked these days. They still had a few friends in common who hadn't deserted him completely, and he'd persuaded Barbara to give up the address. Hell, she was right here in the neighborhood, only 10 blocks away. He turned off the computer and got up and walked into the bedroom. Sarah looked up at him from the bed. Piles of papers fanned out in front of her in an orderly fashion. She was doing something to them with a red felt-tip pen. "I'm going out," he said. "Feeling restless." "Okay, where to?" "Take a walk, have a drink, we'll see." "You going to see Claire?" "I don't know. Maybe. I guess I'll figure that one out once I'm out there. She still doesn't want to see me." She put down the pen. "David, are we in trouble? Do we need to talk?" "No, we're not in trouble, at least not now. I don't know about the long run, I don't know where we're going, but we don't need to talk. Not now." "I worry." "Don't. It's okay. I just might need to see her. I don't know." She looked at him and nodded. "All right, be careful," she said. She meant it, all that careful entailed. "I will. I love you." She went back to her papers. He thought how strange this would look to some outsider, as though she really didn't care. But he knew she did care, and how much. They had 30 years together, and the ties were strong, even if sometimes invisible to most people, stretched thin these days because he had fallen in love, and she of course knew, as she knew everything important in his life. And maybe it was that knowing, as much as the cats they shared, or the apartment they shared, or the fact that she was his first best critic, or even the years themselves of order and easy companionship, which was why he stayed and couldn't seem to leave. Sarah was family by now. He had no other. He put on his jacket and stepped into the hall and locked the door behind him. 8. midnight, and Claire was finally getting to eat. The Caesar salad with grilled chicken she'd asked the cook to leave for her in the microwave. They'd been slammed all night long for a change, but now there was only old Willie in his usual corner, arms folded in front of him and half asleep over his beer. When she finished, she'd roused him. Willie weighed in at a good 200 pounds, and he'd already fallen off his bar stool once since she'd started working here only a few weeks ago. He was going to crack his head open one of these days. She didn't want it to be on her watch. Sandy dumped the last of the candles out of its holder into the black plastic trash bag down at the end of the bar, sighed and smiled and untied her waitress apron and slid it off over her head. "I'm out of here. That okay?" They'd already split the tips and balanced out the register. There hadn't been any discrepancies between that and the cash due printout, or they'd have had to go through the checks together one by one to find the error, and Sandy looked dead on her feet. "Sure, go. You have a good night." "What's left of it?" "Give that guy a hug for me." "Yeah. Hey, listen, I really want to thank you for that. I really appreciate you talking to me. It helped. Kenny's a good kid. Everybody screws up now and then. Just don't let him make a habit of it, that's all." Sandy smiled again and slipped on her jacket and hoisted her shoulder bag. "I won't. See you tomorrow?" "I'll be here." She finished her salad. Hell, she'd wolfed the damn thing down. You got busy. You didn't have time to eat. Then you forgot to eat. Pretty soon you were starving. It was high time she had a shot and a Marlboro. She poured a double Cuervo neat and lit up and let the smoke slide down deep. "Hey, Willie, last call." She watched the heavy eyelids slide up and then down again, what her father used to call the long blink. "Willie, hey." "Time to go." "Oh, yeah, course. Okay, I finished this." He smiled. "Sure." She watched his fingers toy with the neck of the Heineken, literally feeling around for the thing, and then grip it and pour. He had about a third of a glass left. She took a hit of the Cuervo and another pull on the cigarette, and walked around the service station and then down the bar past him to turn off the central air over by the plate glass window, and then heard the sounds of the city rush in to her left as the man opened the door and stepped through. The man nodded and smiled and took off his thin brown leather gloves, and she thought, "Shit, why does this always happen to me?" Because she was supposed to stay open until 1, if there were any customers at all. That was the rule in this place. And here it was 12:45, and it would be just her luck, and she was just that new on the job, that the boss would come around to check up on her if she told this guy she was closed already. The man was tall and wore a good brown 3-piece suit, and he put his brown leather briefcase down on the bar 8 stools back from Willie, just in front of the register, and smiled again and said, "Evening." "Evening," Willie said. The man just looked at him. She had to laugh. "I'm just about to close," she said. "So this'll be last call, but what can I get for you?" If he knew about anything, he knew about bars and barflies, and he could tell from the way the fat guy was sitting on his stool that he was about to drop, that she sure wasn't going to serve him again. So that was when he'd made his move. He'd walked across the street from the flower shop, where he'd been pretending to admire the window display, and through the door. From where he stood, he had a perfect view of the street and the corner of Columbus and 70th. Nice, easy monitoring. "What's on tap?" he said, and she told him. He said he'd take the Amstel. The Amstel came in a frosted mug. He liked that. He took a sip and watched her rinse a few glasses and dry her hands, and then walk over to the fat guy in the corner. He liked the way she walked. It was assertive, very New York. "Hey, Willie! Wake up, Willie!" "Huh? Finish your beer." "Right, okay." He tilted the glass and drank and set it down again. "Tomorrow's another night, Willie. Finish it up." "Okay." He did. "What I owe you?" "You already paid me." "I did?" "Yep." "Tip?" "You left a good one, Willie. Thanks." "Pleasure," he said, and smiled and waved at her once, like he was the goddamn Pope bestowing a drunk benediction, and slid off the bar stool. He tugged once at the collar of his faded gray raincoat and straightened up, and managed not to stagger as he walked out the door. God, he hated barflies. Fucking disgusting. She went back to the dishes again. "He's really a very nice guy," she said. "But with all that weight he's carrying, I worry about him. I'm afraid he's going to have a heart attack or something right in the middle of my shift. Then what am I supposed to do?" "I don't blame you. But say it did happen. What would you do?" She shrugged. "Call 911, I guess. I've seen CPR, but I've never, actually done it." "You've seen CPR?" "Movies, television, not in real life." "Oh, I'm Larry, by the way." He put out his hand. She smiled and dried hers on a towel and took it. "Claire, nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you, Claire." He looked around while she went back to the glasses in the sink and thought, hell, as good a time as any. Slipped on the surgical gloves out of her sight lines beneath the bar, unlatched the briefcase and opened it and pushed it aside with the top open so that it would block any view from the street, and lay the gun down softly on the bar. "Claire?" She looked at him first, and then at his hand spread over the gun, and he watched her face change. He always liked this moment. Revelation time. "Here's what we're going to do, Claire. We're going to pretend we're a pair of old friends. Maybe we even dated way back when. Who knows? And I'm here closing up with you, so you do what you do every night, only I'm here. You lock the door and hit the lights outside and dim the ones in here. Only difference is that once you've done all that, you empty the register into this briefcase. Me, I'm just having a drink, you understand?" She nodded. "Okay, now go on about your business. And Claire, don't even think about trying to run out that door. I know you really want to very much right now, but here's the thing. It takes too long to open the door, throw it back, and then go through. Believe me, I know. You'll be dead before you hit the sidewalk. And I'm already up for murder 1 in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, so it won't mean a thing to me one way or another." He clicked off the safety. "Do we have a meeting of the minds here, Claire?" "Yes." "Good. You know what you're supposed to do?" "Yes." "Then go." "The keys are in my bag. The door keys." "So, get 'em." He watched her, trying to gauge her reaction, as she stooped down to the floor for her bag and set it in front of the speed rack, and opened it and fished out her keyring. Her hands were shaking as she fumbled for the right one, and that was good. Her color was off, and that was good too. But she kept glancing up at him, just before she stooped to retrieve her bag, and then as she set it on the speed rack, and then again as she turned the corner at the service station, and a 4th time as she passed him headed for the door. He thought, this one's a wise ass. She's trying to memorize what I look like. But there were ways to minimize that possibility, and ways to wipe it out almost completely. It was called shock therapy. The night had turned chilly, and David was unprepared for that, dressed only in a light tan jacket, and even with it zipped to the chin, the wind off the river along West End Avenue was enough to send him immediately east, all the way across to Central Park West, where the packed-together rows of high-end residentials blocked it. He walked from 63rd all the way up to 78th Street, wondering what he was doing, keeping to the west side against the buildings, both for the shelter and because you never knew about Central Park and who you might encounter this time of night. It was a lonely stretch, though pretty well lit. A few people out walking their dogs or on their way home from somewhere or other, and light two-way traffic. He supposed the street matched his mood, lonely and at least half-lit. At 78th, he crossed 3 blocks over to Broadway, though her bar was back on Columbus. He meant, he guessed, to describe a wide circle around her, and only then, if he hadn't managed to shake this feeling by then, narrow in. He hoped the feeling would just go away. It was stupid what he was doing. Even just standing across the street from the bar, watching her through the plate glass window, would be stupid. Because if he could see her, then there was also the possibility that she'd see him. Never mind that it was easily as humiliating as standing under her apartment window. To go inside and try to talk to her, which was what he really wanted to do, which was what he was aching to do, was bound to cause more hurt for both of them. There could be no good ending to this. But he was doing it anyway. He headed down Broadway, hands shoved into his jeans against the cold. Some of the bars were still packed, mostly with kids in their 20s, and he heard music and loud laughter, and other bars were still and dark, closed already or just about to close, and the thought came to him suddenly that he had no idea how business was over at her place. She could easily have locked up and gone home by now. It was a definite possibility. The thought filled him with a kind of dread, and he picked up his pace so that by the time he crossed against the red and past Gray Papaya at 72nd Street, his heart was pounding, so he slowed again. It wouldn't be good for her to see him this way, if he was going to be seen at all. He still wasn't sure about that. Wasn't sure what in the hell he was going to do. But this feeling hadn't been mitigated being out here. The night air hadn't cleared his head or cured him, not by a long shot. He was so close to seeing her, at least, to something. He turned east at 70th and walked slowly toward Columbus. She was going to keep this under control. He wouldn't use the gun. He wanted the money, that's all. Fine. "I cashed out already," she said. "The money's in back." "What's in the drawer?" $200 startup money for tomorrow." "Put it in the briefcase. Cash box or safe?" "Cash box, locked in the desk. They wouldn't trust me with the safe. I'm still new here." "Oh, you're not trustworthy?" "I'm new here." She stacked the money in his briefcase. She watched him sip his beer. "You already said that, but what I asked you is, are you trustworthy?" Yes." "Stop that," she thought. Shit. You don't want to show him fear, not the slightest bit of fear. "Should I trust you to go in back there and get the box for me?" "Up to you." He smiled and looked her up and down, and she wished she'd worn something a little less clingy than the thin scoop-neck blouse. "I don't think so," he said. "You're a woman, and I wouldn't trust a woman on a short leash with her fucking legs cut off. Nothing personal. Walk me back, and keep your hands down at your sides. Move." She walked back through the tables and chairs stacked for the night, back to the office, and opened the office door, and thought of slamming it in his face, but that was only a thought, and nothing she'd consider for a moment, because all he wanted was the money. She found the right key for the drawer and opened it, took out the cash box, and put it on the desk beside the printer and computer. She turned, and he was so close, the gun only inches from her chest. She lurched back, and her hip hit the desk. It hurt. Her mouth was very dry all of a sudden. "You want me to, should I open it, or you want to just take it as it is?" "Open it. I like to see what I've got." He was smiling again, and the brown eyes seemed to jitter back and forth, and she thought strangely of ants or bees, of insects, and there was no smile in the eyes at all. It was a relief to turn back to the desk, not to have to look at the eyes. She used 3 fingers against the box to steady her thumb and forefinger, and finally found the keyhole and turned the key and turned and stepped away a little to her left. He lifted the lid. "You had a good night, Claire." He shut it again and took 1 step toward her, his face only inches from her face, directly in front of her. "You really don't know CPR?" "What?" "You really don't know CPR? Just from what you see on television?" "I never—" "So what happens if some customer throws a fit or something? I'm just curious. Aren't you supposed to be in charge of this bar, Claire? Isn't that you? It's not the waiter who's in charge. It's not the fucking busboy. Is pouring a goddamn beer the only thing you're good for? What about responsibility? Suppose I pitched a fit or something. What would you do for me? Call 911 while I'm dying here? Jesus Christ!" "He's crazy," she thought. "He's a goddamn fucking lunatic. And God knows what a lunatic will do." Maybe it isn't just the money. And for the first time now, he really scared her. He had her now. He could tell by the look on her face. Time to put the real fear of God into the bitch, and see if she remembered anything but fear after that. He put the gun against her temple and backed her ass to the desk again. "Open your mouth." "What?" "I said open your mouth. Do it, Claire." She did. "All right, now keep it open, understand? I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you how to do CPR." He reached over and pinched her nostrils shut. Her eyes skittered. He took a deep breath and put his mouth over hers and exhaled hard and heard her gasp when he pulled away and tried to catch her breath, but he did it again before she could, emptied his lungs into her, and this time when he let her up for air she was coughing and her eyes were gleaming with tears. She tasted like smoke and tequila. The coughing stopped. She leaned back against the desk, chest heaving. "There you go. Of course you'd be on your back normally, but you get the idea. Grab the cash box, come on." He marched her back the way they'd come, and saw her wipe her cheek with one hand, and thought, good start. David sat on the steps of a brownstone across the street from the ornate blue and gold Pythian building, a lit cigarette in his hand, trying to will his heart to stop pounding. He'd gotten halfway down the block when it felt like somebody had put a hand to his chest and said, "Asshole, don't you take another step further. Don't even think it." He had no business being here. Not on the steps. Nobody would care about that. But being here, this close, thinking what he was thinking. She'd said she didn't want to see him, period, and no hedging this time, that she couldn't see him. that seeing him had become a kind of grief, played over and over again, and that they simply had to stop, get away from one another, and go lick their wounds until, maybe in time, they could be friends again, or something like friends, but that now they could be nothing. It was the act of a willful, selfish child to be this close to her. What he needed to do was go home, be an adult. He'd made his choice. He should live with it. He gasped at a sudden, unexpected rush of tears. That he should have to choose at all. Not fair. He wiped away the tears and drew on the cigarette and sat there, slowly calming. "Pour me another Amstel, Claire. This one's gone flat. Use one of those good frozen mugs you've got there." She did as he told her to do, while he transferred the contents of the cash box to his briefcase, poured the beer, and set it in front of him, trying to keep her hands from shaking, trying not to spill it, not to show. The taste of him was still in her mouth. He handed her the empty box. "Put that on the floor or something, will you?" She did that too, bent over and set it beside the garbage can, and when she stood up again, something hit her in the chest, and she gasped, something freezing cold sliding down off her chest and over her belly. He was laughing. The frosted glass was empty. "Oops! Little spill there. Gee, sorry." "You—" He leaned in close over the bar. "You what, Claire? You what? What do you want to call me? You want to call me names? Pour me another beer, you dumb little shit. And keep your fucking mouth shut. And I want a new glass." She looked down at herself, arms out to her sides. She didn't know what to do. You could see almost everything through the thin material, and the bra was thin too, so you could even see her nipples puckered by the cold. He could see them, God damn it. If she brushed at it, that would only make it worse, plastering the material to her body. She wanted to cry. She wouldn't cry. She turned to the freezer to get the glass, and that was when she brushed herself off because then he couldn't see. She drew the beer and set it in front of him on the bar, and almost wasn't surprised when he lifted it and threw it all over her again. But when he laughed the second time, then she did cry. She couldn't help it. It just happened. Whether it was humiliation or frustration or fear, or all of these together, she just stood there, eyes closed and quietly sobbing. "Look at me," he said. She wouldn't. If she couldn't see him, then she could almost pretend he couldn't see her. "I said, look at me, damn it." She opened her eyes. What she saw was a man enjoying himself immensely. She couldn't understand. Why was he putting her through this? Shouldn't he be running away right now? Wasn't he at all worried about the cops? How could anybody be like this? "You stink of beer, Claire. Clean yourself off. You smell like a slut. Use that hand towel there. Dip it in some water. That's right. You have nice nipples, Claire. Say, 'Thank you, sir.' I'm the customer. The customer's always right." "Thank you." She plucked the material out in front of her and wiped at it with a wet rag. The blouse was going to be stretched and ruined. "Thank you, sir, Claire." "Thank you, sir." "Better. Now hand me that spindle." "The what?" "Jesus Christ, Claire, you've worked in bars for how long? The spindle. The goddamn spindle, the spike you stack your checks on, for Christ's sake." She didn't want to do this. Her heart was suddenly hammering. She hated those things, always had, even just to look at them. The spike was maybe 8 inches long, rising straight up out of a thick coil of wire at its base. This one was set at the service station below one of the wine racks, and whenever she had to climb up onto the counter to get to one of the more pricey wines up top, she had visions of losing her balance and falling right onto it, of being impaled. She could see it. Ridiculous, horrible way to die. The spike was as sharp and thick as an ice pick. "Please, I don't—" Begging. I like that. "Those things scare me, okay?" "Why? You use it every day." "They just do." "Maybe I want to scare you." "What?" "Please." "Maybe I want to scare you. Maybe I don't like you one goddamn bit, Claire. And maybe I want to scare you so much I could almost come in my pants just thinking about it. What if the money is only a kind of perk? Maybe this is what it's all about. You ever consider that, you dopey whore?" "Why?" "Why? Because I want to. Because this gun tells us both I can. You hear me, you ugly fuck? You get ugly when you cry, Claire. You know that? You want to know why? Because after me, you'll never feel safe again, Claire. Never. Not at work, not at home, nowhere. Because that's my wish for the whole fucking world and for you, Claire, in particular. Now hand me the goddamn spindle." She could barely see him through the tears, but she could feel the heat of his anger reach out to her across the bar. For a split second she imagined him bursting into flame. Where did all this come from? Why? What had she done? David thought, if she hates me for it, so be it. I have to see her. He crushed out the cigarette and stepped down off the brownstone. "I want to show you how we're going to do this, Claire. Stop blubbering, for Christ's sake. Take one of those cocktail napkins there. Wipe your goddamn nose. You're going to do it once first, just so you can see how hard it is, and then it's my turn. See, I put my hand on the bar, palm down, just like this. Then you pick up the spindle. You raise it over the center of my hand to exactly the level of this beer mug. No lower and no higher. Lower's cheating. Higher, and it'll never work. Then you try to spike me." "I can't." "Sure you can. I'll give you some incentive. You spike me, and the game's over right now, and you get to keep whatever's in your tip jar. I don't think you will, though. Like I say, it's hard. Assuming you don't, then I get 3 tries. I miss all 3, you keep whatever's in your tip jar. I don't miss, well, then you're shit out of luck, Claire. Now pick up the spindle. And remember, the gun's in the other hand, so you don't want to be thinking about doing anything else with it other than playing our little game." He watched her eyes. The eyes always flickered when they made their move. The eyes were a dead giveaway, but he didn't even need the eyes this time. Instead of bringing it straight on down, she raised it a half-inch first, so it was an easy thing to pull his hand away. Gave it a lot of force, though. She was game. He gave her that much. He freed the spindle from the bar. "Okay, my turn." "No, please, just take the money. Just leave me alone, please. Enough, all right? All right." The husky voice had turned into a whine. The eyes were red with tears. He smiled. "Not enough, Claire. Not all right. But what are you worried about? You saw how tough it is. I'll probably lose anyway, right? Of course, maybe I won't." "I can't. Please." "You can, Claire. You have to. See the gun? See this tubing at the end? It's called a silencer. I made it myself. That means I can shoot you 3 or 4 times if I want to, without even killing you. You dumb piece of shit, and nobody's going to hear it. The neighbors upstairs will never be the wiser. And that, Claire, is a world of pain, I promise you. You want it to go down that way? Fine by me. Different game is all. Nastier. Oh, Jesus. Why? You know the little piffed sound silencers always make in the movies? Doesn't happen. More like car door closing. So, what'll it be? She thought of her widowed mother in Queens, and how in another month it would be Christmas, and then of her sister married 3 months almost to the day, and pregnant out in Oregon, and that she'd never visited. Thought of the paintings just finished and half-finished, and of David still not free of her, nor her of him. And she thought about the kitten who curled between her feet each night, and who would feed her and take care of her, and apprehend something of what the world would be like without her in it, an almost impossible concept just an hour ago, but glimpsed now for a moment, and thought, I'm so afraid of what I won't get to see. And she put her hand down on the bar. And now his control is complete. He can see it in her eyes. He can see she knows a truth he's known all along, that there is no help in this world, that what will happen, and no amount of pleading to God or Jesus or to the milk of human kindness will get you any goddamn where at all, that in the face of loathing as deep and strong as his is, she is just another worker ant in an anthill he can bring down in a second, crush beneath his feet at any time he wishes. Her hand on the bar says all of this to him, and the temptation is there to do it to her on the very first plunge of the spike, to bring it instantly into even more stark perspective for her, the perspective of flesh, of spilled blood, of pain. Yet he resists that. He lets her pull away and listens to her gasp and the dull thud of the spindle against the bar, and raises it again, and watches her hand slide across the bar to submit a second time, and wonders, is she hopeful? Does she see an end to this? Because he seems to have missed. That this might be true is delightful to him, too, because he can wipe it all away so quickly. He has lied again, and he is very good at this. He has had practice. And if hope is not yet there, he can place it in her heart on this second try. Bait his trap for the hungry animal, which is all she is, after all, hungry for the truth of what he knows to be. And this time he can practically hear her heart beating, racing as she pulls away, because, yes, he can feel the hope there, coiled in her like a snake. He has missed by a mile, it seems to her, and he can smell the stink of hope, its sudden sweet reek, as he positions the spike above her hand a third and final time, and then, prescient and sly and born of months and years, watching his back, trusting his senses, he glances out the plate-glass window to the street. "Who the hell is that?" he says. And at first she can only think it's part of this game he's playing, this insane, evil, fucked-up game. And she doesn't look up at all, but only at her hand on the bar, waiting for the courage to pull it away, if she can, a third time. But then the words and the tone of the words seem to spill through to her, and what she hears is unexpected, wrong in these circumstances, a flat, even tone, as if he'd said, "Well, that's interesting, it's raining out." And she looks first at him and then at where he's looking, and sees David on the corner by the closed, dark flower shop across the street. Their eyes meet, and he's scowling, puzzled, and she thinks, oh, no. Oh, God, no, I was so close. I might have finished this here and now. She remembers seeing him down on the street across from her apartment building many nights ago, and drawing away from the curtain before he glimpsed her at the window, and remembers thinking how terribly sad it was for both of them, and how wasteful that she could never, ever have come out to meet him, and thinks, David, why in hell are you here again? What in hell have you done now? She holds his gaze and slowly shakes her head. Don't even think it. The scowl disappears. Instead, the eyes plead with her, confused and uncertain, eyes so well known and loved. She needs to deny these eyes for both of them. Who is he, Claire? My boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend. Ex? We've broken up. So what's he doing here? I don't know. The man seems to think a moment. She watches David take a step closer to the curb. She shakes her head again. No, goddammit, don't do this. Please, you fucking lovely idiot. Stay the hell away. I think you'd better invite him in, Claire. No. Oh, yes, you have to. I won't. Yes, you will. Or it's you first and then him. 20 seconds is all I need. He'll never know what hit him. He closes the briefcase beside him and snaps it shut and slides the spindle down the bar well beyond her reach. He's ready to go now. The game is over. All of it over now, unless she brings David into this. And if she does, won't it just begin again? To what end? Why does he want this? What can he hope to gain? He can walk out the door right now, free and clear. Just walk away. Her eyes go back to David, to hold him there. Don't move. Do it. I can't. You will. She thinks, hard and fast as best she can. She will not do this to him. And there seems only one way to do that, to convince him that she's furious at him for being there. He ought to be able to believe that. He ought to have anticipated that reaction from her. She has every right to be furious, though she's not. Though seeing him again, even under these terrible circumstances, feels so tender that what she'd like to do is embrace him, hug him, sob into his shoulder, not just for what this man has put her through tonight, but for all they've lost and all they had, to do that one more time again, what she'd sworn she'd never do. She moves out past the service station and turns and heads past the man to the door. Outside on the corner, David sees her long, purposeful, familiar stride, but the look on her face is unfamiliar. It's a look he can't quite read, when he thought he knew them all. He's only just arrived here, but already something feels wrong about her, and he thinks, who's this guy in there? New boyfriend? Boss? But boyfriend doesn't feel right. Of course, it's possible he just doesn't want to admit that she might already have one, might already have replaced him. But boyfriend doesn't feel right, nor does boss. Something about her face, the look in her eyes. A car passes, and then another. Claire is at the lock now. He steps out into the street. Claire looks up from the lock, and he's crossing, coming toward her, and she feels the blood rush to her face, pulse pounding, and she flings open the door because she will not expose him to this, goddammit. She will not permit that. and summons the most dismissive, angry tone of which she is capable, and shouts out into the still night air, "David! Go! Get out of here," is what she means to say. But the sheer, sudden size of her voice startles the man inside, and he thinks, "Help! The police! She's calling for help, the stupid bitch!" So he turns and fires, and the flower blooms wet in her back, and he hears the silencer like a door closing exactly as he's told her it would be, and she falls, spilled to one side, the glass door wedged open by her hips, and he pulls the briefcase off the bar, thinking, the fucking cop was right. He's finally had to shoot somebody. And the boyfriend is almost across the street, closing the gap between them. And as he steps over her body, he sees her eyes flutter, stunned and wide, and the man is yelling, "Claire! Claire!" loud enough to wake the dead, the man not exactly understanding yet, he thinks. But there's no way to know what he'll do once he does. So as he turns a sharp right, headed toward the subway at 72nd, he fires again and watches for just a moment a second flower bloom across the man's chest, watches him sink to his knees and fall and reach for her, the man's hand settling in her flung, tangled hair along the sidewalk, his hand opening and closing in strands of hair, unable to reach further. He doesn't know if he feels fear. He might. Maybe he should. But he knows he feels good. David lies sprawled along the sidewalk. The sidewalk feels oddly warm to him. It ought to feel cold this time of year. He tries to move, but can't. He tries to breathe and barely can. Is this shock? Death? What? He sees her lying near him in the doorway. If he focuses on her, on Claire, he might live. Someone might come by. That he might even want to live disgusts him. She stares up, blinks into empty sky. Tears again. So many tears in this city. So much heartbreak. Then, none. Thanks to Amy, Mila, and Adonis. I apologize for feeling I had to leave you with this one. For months after 9/11, I wasn't able to write at all. Fiction seemed utterly trivial to me, particularly fictional terrors. I had a conversation with Peter Straub at our local watering hole one evening, and he confessed to having the same problem. As New Yorkers, each of us found it wholly understandable. But writing's what we do. So eventually, it occurred to me that one way to solve my problem was to write about terror directly, though on a smaller canvas, with the World Trade Center as backdrop, but with personal mano-a-mano terrorism front and center, metaphor as storyline. What I wrote turned out to be the most bleak and hopeless piece I'd ever produced. And it was only after I read the galleys for the leisure paperback edition of Peaceable Kingdom, in which the story first appeared, that I realized exactly why. I hadn't really written about terror at all. I'd written about loss, irreversible, irretrievable loss. Pas stokalo. It's Greek to me. Go with the good.